Plus 2 Pokercast, presented by RunItOnce.com. I'm your host, Dave Schwartz, alongside Mr. Rosco P. Coltrane.
Hey, how are you?
And Mr. Terrence Chan, T-Chan. You had some food poisoning issues. What, did you have like some...
I don't know, and it's the weirdest thing
or something?
Because I cooked at home all the, that entire day and the entire day before. Not only that, but my girlfriend ate the exact same meals as me. The only thing that we could come down to was, like, in one of the particular meals, I had potatoes and she didn't. And potatoes is not normally something you associate with,
sickness.
It's not like I just pulled some raw oysters out of the ocean and decided to...
Nobody cooks potatoes like the Irish.
Very nicely done. But yeah, apparently I don't, and I'm not Irish, so that makes sense. So
you were just like deathly ill.
I mean, it was one of those nights where like I was in bed with like 7 blankets and still felt cold, kind of thing. It was just really bizarre. We Googled it. There's something I guess that's called like solanine poisoning, which apparently happens once in a while.
Is this Internet MD?
Yes. This is Dr. Google, right? This is Dr. Google talking. I mean, I haven't been to a real doctor in like forever.
Me either.
Than,
Refuse.
Like required things. Like I have to get a medical license to compete in MMA. So it's like,
you have to do that.
Yes, I'm fine. Like, no, I'm not going to die. But yeah, I mean, I got a little sick. Spent a little quality time on the toilet, and
there you go.
But then 48 hours later, I'm good.
You're all good. This is Pokercast 436 today. It is October 23rd. 2016, I believe. It's 2016.
I believe that is the correct year.
We're getting close to 17.
Can we get a Patrick Antonius on there?
Yeah. Today we've got Mr. Jason Strasser is going to join us, fresh off his not
appearance.
His appearance in the €1 million big one for one.
But that's more than most people can say, because
pretty,
basically, in theory, all professional poker players couldn't do that, of course.
No.
Jason, not a professional poker player these days, even though
that's how he got in. He's not a pro, right?
Exactly, even though back in the day, obviously, he was one of the end bosses.
He was.
So, yeah, it'd be good to catch up with my buddy Jason and see what he's doing over and out there.
Mr. Chris Kruk, John Kruk. I like the John Kruk of the MLB fame.
That's
before your gambling time. You wouldn't know who John Kruk is.
The dude with the testicle, right?
The dude, does he have one testicle?
Didn't he lose a testicle?
Uniballer?
Yeah, didn't he lose a testicle, John Kruk?
Maybe. I don't know. Is this how you remember, guys?
Yeah.
Is there anybody else that you know that has one testicle?
This is what I know. This is what I know about baseball. Is when something like that hits my like child brain or something.
You remember that?
Yes. He did have testicular cancer in 1994 during spring training and had one testicle removed.
Who do you play for?
Philadelphia Phillies.
And I was 13 at the time, so I mean the thought. I mean, obviously, testicular is no joke. I mean, we don't make fun of cancer as adults, but like when you're 13 years old and you hear about a man with one testicle, you just giggle and giggle and giggle. Ask Rudy about one testicle, and we'll see.
Chris Kruk is the gentleman that's going to join us. He's a coach.
As far as we know, he has 2 testicles.
I'm going to assume. I don't really want to ask him that right off the top. That's probably something that we should not get into.
Just because he's,
maybe that could be the new running gag. We ask
how many
testicles
coach
how many you got? Yeah. How many you got?
Well, how many you got?
The line is 1.5.
Yes, minus over minus 4 billion. So that's going to be fun. We're going to do that in the second segment or third segment, depending how long we go. Quick off the top, I forgot to mention this a few shows in a row now.
Okay.
My brother and sister-in-law are currently on a really big show in the UK. And it's called this. They're my brother and sister. My wife's brother.
Okay.
His name's David.
And his wife.
And his wife are on it, Julie.
So what is Hunted?
The show's called Hunted. It's fantastic. Okay. So it's really interesting. It is about the surveillance state that we all live in now.
Right.
What happens is there's a group of investigators, of which my in-laws are 2 of them, and they let people go throughout the UK. I think there's 12 people or something, and they have to track them down. They get their cell phone data. They get, they get access to all the CCTVs. They get access to all these.
So it's basically like how good can amateur people be like the surveilance state?
Exactly. Trying to beat it. So
fascinating.
It is pretty interesting. Yeah, it's called Hunted if you're in the UK. And you're watching it.
Britain has great TV, and I was going to throw this in. I'm super stoked that the new season of Black Mirror is on.
Oh right, yeah, you wanted to mention that.
Black Mirror is just. I mean, God, British people do.
Tell me about Black Mirror.
Sure, I'll tell you about Black Mirror. It's basically like dystopian sci-fi, but it's not. It's sci-fi that's really cutting.
You lost me at dystopian sci-fi. No, I'm sorry, kidding.
It's like on the. It's so close to our current reality. So basically, I don't want to say as little as possible, but the first episode of the new season is about like a world where everybody has a rating system, and you grab your phone and you rate somebody after an interaction, which is like so close to real life.
It's not far away.
But it basically takes elements that are in our current society and kind of pushes them to the extreme to make it a little farther. It's like you and Ross both know I don't watch TV. Like I don't really like TV. Like I don't, but I love Black Mirror, and it's fantastic. It's my strongest recommendation.
It's on Netflix.
So it is on Netflix. The new season.
Netflix Canada or Netflix US?
Well, I mean, I know it's on Netflix Canada. I can't know for sure if it's on Netflix US, but yeah.
Check that out. And a quick condolences to those who knew and are close to David Kulkla, who was Blondie, of course. One of the old school late night poker guys from England. And he passed away from cancer at the age of 52 this week. Sad to hear that. Was involved with all kinds of stuff over in English poker. And also, 2010 November 9er Soy Nguyen passed away. I couldn't find much on it to confirm it, to be 100% sure. I think Poker News did a quick article on it. But if that's the case, also a very sad story this week. So wanted to just pass that along. Should we? Why don't we just quickly get into, in case you missed it, and talk about the big one with Mr. Jason Strasser.
How did he miss the open goal? 6x4, and he comes up 0. Oh no! Oh yes, he missed it.
He's missed it. How on earth did he miss that?
In case you missed it, there was a small tournament that they held somewhere in Monaco.
Why do they even cover these things?
I don't know.
Like 25
I
people.
guess there were some zeros in this tournament. I believe 1 million of them was the buy-in, of course, of the big one for one drop. Held just last week in lovely Monaco. One of the people who played in it, unfortunately, didn't take down all the money, but was just fortunate enough to get the invite. Is one of the old school internet geniuses back in the original days. He's no longer a professional poker player. Now he's the CEO of a successful hedge fund called Caption Partners. It's my pleasure to welcome my buddy Jason Strasser to the Pokercast. Jason, how's it going, man?
Hey, good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So, how did you get in this thing?
Yeah,
I guess that's the thing everybody wants to know. And we're pretty much we're going to hang up on you as soon as you get it. How did you get in this thing, and how can somebody else get in next year? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
But tell us give us the story.
It's pretty funny. Like, so when it got announced, a couple of my poker friends were giving me shit, basically being like, "Hey, man, like, none of us can play this thing. Maybe you'd be the person to play this, and it would be a good spot." And I was always like, "You guys are never going to put me in this tournament. There's no way." And I'm not going to put up €1 million to play an event like that. So, it was one of those things where it just started off as a joke, and then literally like 2 weeks before the event, I had no plans of playing. I actually had plans to be in New York for work right after the tournament should have ended. And one of my friends texted me and he said, "Hey, you really need to play this thing." And he had gotten a hold of a list of players that were trying to enter, and it was like pretty flabbergasting. And he was basically like, "You should see if you can play this thing. I'm not sure if they'll let you play, but there's a guy named Andrew Pantling that's playing who's definitely more qualified than you in terms of a professional poker player, and he's way better than you. So, but other than him, you'd be a good spot in this field." And I was like, "All right, whatever." I literally got an email, and I emailed the one drop guys, and I said, "Hey, can I play?" And they basically did a little interview with me, and then.
So what was the interview like? How does that go down?
It's funny. They were like, "Do you make money outside of poker?" I was like, "Yeah, I haven't made money in poker in a long time." And they were like, "Well, it says on the internet that you've done really well in poker." I'm like, "Yeah, it's a long time ago." And they're like, "Well, you won like a World Series of Poker circuit event a few years ago." And I was like, "Yeah, I was just donking around and got lucky. Like, there's really nothing to see here." And so they were kind of like suspicious about all this stuff. And I was like, and they're like, "Well, you just cashed in the main event." I'm like, "Yeah, like I play like 1 or 2 tournaments a year. I've been running pretty hot, and there's really nothing to see here." And so they were basically like, "Listen, it's up to Guy. It's ultimately up to Guy." And I was like, "Okay." And then I was like, and I think I'll leave his name out, but there was another poker pro guy turned hedge fund, or at least finance, but he he had just gotten a job in finance like within a year, and he also had a much more accomplished poker resume than me. And they were debating whether to let him in as well, and he didn't make the cut. But anyway, I found that out later. But so they went to Guy with a bunch of people that were apparently borderline, and Guy was like, "I don't know who this guy is. You should definitely let him play."
Never heard of him. Yeah.
And so then I had to play, and then it was actually pretty interesting because I was able to sell off all the action I wanted to sell off, but the last challenge I had was getting euros, it's actually surprisingly hard to do it. And
really?
You're in the finance industry. You're supposed to know. You're supposed to know people.
Go to the bar. There's got to be an exchange guy there.
Yeah, you're right. Like in a work capacity, I get euros in a heartbeat in my hedge fund. But like personally, I had bank accounts with the local Oklahoma bank and Wells Fargo, and both of them were just complete not helpful at all. Like Wells Fargo wanted to charge me basically 7% vig on €1 million.
Wow! Holy shit!
Yeah. Yeah, and on the way back too. That was just getting euros. If I had one on the way back, it would have been the same because you had to send the money back the way it came. And so it was actually it came down to the last minute whether I was going to play or not. And finally, what I know happened was that there were at least 10 players that were going to play. Like they thought they were going to have in the 40s in terms of number of people in this tournament. And because of like money laundering concerns and the Monaco casino, like they were really tough on certain people that were trying to buy in. Like there were apparently people that showed up in Monaco, and the Monaco casino was not taking their money.
Wow! They flew all the way there for the tournament, and they couldn't play.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, and I think there was also like so I think Guy at the end was doing whatever he could to accommodate people that were playing because he knew that they were going to have problems getting the head count, and so basically he allowed me to wire Guy the dollars, and Guy converted them in market for me. So that basically solved the last thing, and I was very appreciative that Guy helped me out to do that. He didn't even know me, but so that was it. It really happened in the last second. Literally, one of my friends was like, "I'll buy 70% of you," and I was like, "Whoa!" And then,
how do you negotiate a markup in this field when you don't know the field? That's got to be strange.
Well, I mean, I think not knowing the field. Yeah, I was going to say not knowing the field is the benefit.
The person that gave me like a bunch of the money for the buy-in like was the one that saw the field and gave me the markup, and everyone paid the same markup that bought a piece of me. And yeah, it just seemed like a fair deal. And for me it was like, I mean, obviously I thought it would be a great spot, and it was a great spot. Like when I was playing that tournament, there's no question that was like a good spot. And the other thing about it was like an amazing experience. Like I went up there with my girlfriend and a bunch of friends from Oklahoma. I mean, everyone thought I was like a billionaire who didn't know me. And it was a very fun experience. They had this really amazing party on the first night where it was like this incredible dinner that was like 60 courses served by Cirque du Soleil people that were doing all this funny stuff. Like one guy was, I don't know, they brought out oysters in a bathtub full of ice where there's a crazy woman inside under the ice, like
what
crazy stuff, and you like
Wim Hof?
you ate the oysters off the ice. Yeah, it was way out there. I'd never seen anything like that. And then the cash games were going. I didn't get involved in that, but like they were playing like really, really, really big cash games, and there were some interesting looking people involved in those cash games. So I think everyone involved, it was a really good spot. And if I hadn't gone with a bunch of friends, I think the actual best spot was the cash games because they were playing massive, and then there was unquestionably some good spots in those cash games.
How big were the cash games? What were they playing?
Well, I saw them playing like a 500 1K no limit, and they seemed to be straddling a lot in that game, so that was pretty big. And then everyone seemed to have $500,000 in front of them. And then there was another mixed game that was like of equal kind of size. Wow. And then when I left on the last day, they were playing some sort of $1 million buy-in cash game that I didn't know the details on that. But they saved the best for last. But I left when I lost. But yeah, they were still going until Monday or Tuesday of that week.
You weren't scrambling to try and get in the cash game?
Yeah, it's funny. I had set up all these meetings in New York, and basically my plan was if I lost, I was going to go to New York. And I had a coworker that basically was traveling a long way to meet me in New York, and I felt bad. So
you should have sent him on the jet to Monaco.
Yeah, I should have. But yeah, it was a pretty amazing experience all in all, and it was a great spot. Like there a Canadian singer in the field. His name was Guru. And just to give you a flavor of some of these hands, like James Board, who is a very, very he seemed like a tight player at the time. Apparently, he doesn't always play that tight, but he was playing tight. A lot of players who's like, I got a bunch of reads on players beforehand. They're like, oh, I play with that guy. Like, people play differently in this setting than they do in a normal setting. So there's a lot more like tight and like really tight play going on. Really.
How deep did you start? Like, what did you start with?
You start ridiculously deep. It starts like So I think it was like 3,600 with Annie, and you start with 5 million in chips. You basically start ridiculously deep. However, the levels are 45 minutes long, and it goes up really fast. So by the end of the first day, the average stack was like 40 blinds. So it went really quickly, and then the second day was just a massive turbo, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the hand with Guru, because I mean this is interesting.
Oh
so,
yeah, I'm just to give you an idea of like kind of the play. Like there were some people that just didn't know what was going on. Like I think Guru, the rumor was that he was put in by somebody else. He's a Canadian pop singer. The rumor was that Guy put him in the tournament. And Guy seemed very interested in all the. Actually, Guy was out of the tournament, but I heard Guy getting a recap of his hand, and Guy was like, "What?" But it was something like, I'm going to screw the action up a little bit, but. James Board opens. I think Guru 3-bets him in position, and James Board calls, and the flop is ace, ace, ace. And I believe it goes check, bet, call on the flop, and on the turn it's like an 8 or something. James Board leads out. Guru raises, and James Board goes all in for a big bet. Where he can only have an ace in the spot. There's nothing there. And Guru tank calls him with 2 9s. And like, I just remember seeing that hand, and I was like, man, like that was kind of how the field was. Like, you just needed to, like, my problem was I had very good table draws, but like, you know how it is, you need to play a little tight, at least pre-flop, and I just wasn't really getting in great spots. But it was a great tournament. There was out of the 27 players, there were about 3 or 4 of them like that really just didn't really understand poker at all.
Wow. So who was at your starting table? Do you have a recollection of, or did you know everybody, I guess?
Yeah, so Guy busted right away. Guy was the first to bust and rebought in and came to my table, and then I had a couple guys that there was a couple guys on my table who like I had Haralabos on my table, and he obviously knows what he's doing, and I had Paul Newey at my table, who was very, very, very tight, but obviously knew what he was doing and had experience. And then there was a guy on my left I never heard of, and I didn't get his name. I had no idea who he was, and then Guy was at my table, and we were like 7 or 8 handed for a while, so it was a pretty solid like spot to be in.
Did you have a sense of, like, the people you played against that you were not too familiar with? Obviously, you mentioned Haralabos, and he's going to be a tough player, and then you mentioned Guy, who's obviously running the tournament and wants to splash around a bit. Did you get a sense, being around these sort of elites of the world and these people, what €1 million meant to them? Like, was it just like they were playing this thing like, you and I might play like $100 rebuy at a charity casino for, might just kind of blast off? Like, were they taking it seriously? Like, what was kind of sense that you got among the sort of non-serious players?
Yeah, it really varied by player. I think most of them didn't want to do anything that was like embarrassing. Like I'm not sure if the money was that important, but I don't think like I think Guy didn't want, like, I felt like Guy did not want to bust again and be the guy that like busted had to rebuy in twice when everyone else didn't buy in at all. I think maybe one other person rebought. I think only maybe 2 or 3 people busted on the first day, because it was really deep on the first day, so you wouldn't expect that many people to bust, but there were definitely guys, though, that it was really not. You could tell that the money was just not a factor for them, and then you could tell guys that you think money would not be a factor for them, but they were really, really, really sweating it. But overall, it was a very casual atmosphere. Like, there was no tanking. The players were really nice to each other. There were a couple other hedge fund guys in the field, so it was a really great opportunity for me to meet people that were like way more successful than I was that I am in my career. But yeah, it was. I would rate the whole experience as really enjoyable poker, and even the people where like it seemed like they were really sweating the money. It was still a relaxed atmosphere, and I didn't see anybody like make a scene. I didn't see anyone get cursing at a dealer or doing. It was a very like, even though the levels were really short, we actually got to play a lot of poker because there was just no tanking.
Nice.
Very very different than when you go to play any big blind tournament now where there's just tons of tanking. So. Again, it felt like the money wasn't that big of a deal for most of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you note the atmosphere in particular because, I mean, the week of the tournament, Adam, and you probably saw this as well, there was I saw a lot of, I mean, I can't frame it any better than like sort of bitter tweets from a lot of the high rolling players who were kind of like, and I think you were one of the names that came up and people kind of rolled their eyes and say like, okay, this guy can play, really, like, and it's, I sort of get it in the sense that, you're not some sort of mega billionaire, whatever concept these people have of, you're not Bill Gates, you're not Warren Buffett, you're a guy who's still relatively young, you're up and coming, but you've got, your own company, your thing going on, but it's maybe.
I wouldn't buy into this event. I'm not like the sort of networking guy I'm looking for. It's true. Yeah.
But I mean, I think you understand the game a little bit and enough to know that I think the environment sort of matters, and if there's a 2017 or a 2018 version of this tournament, I would imagine you'd expect to get your invite in the mail. But have you heard about, by the way, any future events, or did it even get to that level of discussion?
Everyone is saying that if there is another one of these things, it won't be in Monaco, just because the money situation was such a I mean, it was a real pain. It was a pain for me, and it was a real pain for certain high rollers who couldn't even buy in when they got there. So, and I think Guy had to Guy helped me buy in. I think he helped a lot of people buy in. So, I think if they were doing it again, it would be in Vegas, almost positively. That's what a lot of people were saying. So
maybe in Macau.
I don't know if they're doing it.
Let's do it in Macau. Hong Kong has no rules. We all know that. You know that too. You've been here. You've done business there. You've done no rules.
Yeah. Hong Kong would be awesome. Macau, sorry.
If you think, like, if you look back and obviously you're not going to know, but maybe just your opinion. There's a lot of people saying, look, if this was open to everybody, because they confirmed 35, I think, and maybe the word confirmed is lost in translation with.
Well, the money situation, obviously, it sounds like it cost at least
might have cost them some,
a few players for sure.
It definitely cost them like. A lot, yeah.
Do you think maybe if they just opened it, if Guy opened it up, that they would have had more than 25?
I have no idea. Probably. I mean, the first one. What did the first one have? Like 40 or 50? Or 60
something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess it really comes down to, like, I think Guy was trying to turn this into like a big networking type of thing as well, and like a whole experience where rich people didn't feel like they were getting just robbed by a pro.
Right.
But yeah, and I think the first one drop, they were kind of surprised at how many pros were able to sort of pool together a buy-in. Like, I think that was one of the surprise. I don't think they expected that many pros to buy in. I mean, what was the field? It was like over half was like a pro, right? At least, right?
At least, yeah.
And they're running satellite. They're running like $25,000 satellites, $50,000 satellites, trying to get people in. Yeah, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's really complicated where to draw the line, right? These things aren't really easy to do. Like, Paling is a good example. Like, Paling was a very successful online player, fairly recently, and but he makes all his money right now betting sports, is what everyone was saying. So, or running a sports book or something. So, he passes the test that he doesn't make his money from poker. For me, I didn't feel that guilty about it. I mean, obviously I lost, so I shouldn't feel guilty. But even beforehand, I didn't feel that guilty about it because I was thinking, I probably play less poker than every single person in that field.
Wow.
If you think about in the last year, like, of people playing poker, like, a lot of these players, I think, well, maybe those 2 or 3 guys who I feel like a lot of people play a lot of poker, but don't necessarily like do the right things.
Right.
Aren't really getting better at poker. And leading up to the event, I actually I worked on my game for the first time in a long time. I obviously went through a bunch of range stuff. just basic things have changed, obviously. And that's not to say I've had my head up my ass for 10 years, but, just like stuff like defending in the big blind when there's big antes and things like that. And just a lot more, just like refreshing some ranges. And I had some really good people backing me at poker, and all of them were really helpful. And I think that was part of the best experience for me, is that the people that were backing me, they were all poker players for the most part. And a lot of them were like, hey, read this. Hey, look at this hand range. Hey, think about this spot here. I got some coaching for some ICM situations. And, on the bubble, we knew the bubble was going to be, really, really shallow, 10 blinds. I didn't quite get to the bubble, but, if I was closer to the bubble, just what hands you call with, what hands you fold with, the ranges were different than what I would have done. And so I felt like part of the really cool experience for me was getting this amazing refresher course in poker from these amazing players, which is one of the cool byproducts of having good players put you in tournaments.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you exactly about that. You were not only coached by, obviously, the people who had percentage of you and want to do well, but also you were allowed to bring, and so was everybody else, allowed to bring one actual professional poker player coach. You chose Andrew Roble, some other, I don't recall, actually. I was trying to look up real quick the other coaches that were sort of brought in, but maybe you can mention some of them. But how did that dynamic work? How did the coaches interact with the players? What was their sort of incentive? What was going on there with that coaching scene?
Yeah, so Roble was my coach. Roble is obviously plays a lot of high stakes poker with all sorts of different people, and he, in terms of finding a coach that really knew the field, Roble I thought was amazing, and obviously Roble's amazing at poker as well. So I thought that made a lot of sense. There were basically two kinds of coaches. There was one that was just a kind of maybe leading up to the event, giving a little bit of advice, and then while the event was going on, sort of not really paying attention. For example, John Robert Ballon was Bobby Baldwin's coach. That was just a joke.
We found that pretty funny. I did see that.
Yeah,
that
you had all sorts of things like that. Roble wasn't watching every hand. I actually don't think he watched any of my hands. But he was if I had a new player come to my table, I would be like, hey, and if he knew the player and was able to help me about that player, he'd be like, oh, I played with that guy before and help me out. But that was basically the extent of my coaching at the tournament. Beforehand, he was very helpful and sort of, hey, check this out, read this, look at that. But they were different. Vanessa was coaching David Einhorn. David Einhorn was at my table on the second day. I actually busted him when he was short. But, she was watching every hand. She ran over at one point and handed him an iPad that had,
wow.
all-in ranges with his stack.
Wow.
And he was actually looking at that during the hand. I was joking with him. Some people would be upset by this. I don't really care. But he was sitting there with an iPad in front of him with push-fold ranges. And so I think that was probably, to go from one extreme where it was John Robert being, coaching Bobby Baldwin, to the other extreme where it was sort of Vanessa really sort of watching every hand. And, Tom I'm going to get his name wrong. I should know his name. Tom M., the best player in the world of poker, whatever. He was coaching Marchese or Marchese, I don't know how to pronounce it. Tom was coaching Carrie Katz. No, not Carrie Katz. He was coaching Brandon Stevens at my table.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the coaches, and I was talking to them, a lot of the coaches were sort of I think they were having a hard time sort of coaching their players leading up to it. I don't think a lot of the players were actually being coached. I think day of they were getting some crash course type stuff. I saw a lot of people grabbing coffee with their coach in the hotel lobby right before the tournament started, that kind of thing. I don't think there was a whole... I know there were some players that really done a lot of work. But yeah, again, a lot of the field was some of these guys
well, they're experienced players, right? They may not be
exactly.
elite world-class players, but a lot of these people, like you say, they do play poker. They'll play a few times a year, and people like that, they often can be sort of set in their ways when it comes to strategy. I think the modern professional poker player is always learning and always trying to evolve and always trying to take feedback in from as many sources as possible. But I don't know if you're just sort of independently wealthy and you show up for this tournament and your coach is some big name who's got a lot of bracelets or wins a lot of money on the internet, but I feel like sometimes that just the advice either goes over the head or just gets completely ignored or stonewalled or whatever. Because it's not it's not the easiest thing to be a coach in that sort of context, right?
Yeah, definitely not. And I think that what you said is exactly right. Like I was actually expecting, I thought people would like get a little bit of coaching and then like try to apply things that were challenging. For example, like defending in the big blind. Like, if you look at like where top players now are defending a button raise from the big blind when it's antes and it's a 2.3x raise, that range is very, very, very wide. Like, I was thinking that there are some players that were going to come in and be defending like that because that's what the coach tells them to do. But then like really not knowing how to sort of handle post flop that well. But really the play that overall in the tournament was extremely, extremely tight. And it didn't feel like to me like there was a whole bunch of coaches having an impact on the play. Like I felt like at most it was minimal. Like maybe at the end when when the players are being handed a push fold chart, that was probably the biggest impact. But like I don't think that was happening a lot, by the way. But yeah, I don't think the coaches had a very big impact on the play.
Did Guy have a coach?
Yeah, Negreanu was coaching Guy, and Negreanu was watching every hand. It was funny. Like I was in a hand with Guy where I think I actually wasn't in the hand. I was at the table with Guy where he flops an open-ended straight flush draw on the flop, and he checks, and one guy bets and one guy calls, and Guy overcalls. And anyway, it goes to the river, and then afterwards, Negreanu comes up. He goes, "You check raise the flop, right?" And Guy's like, "Yeah, I check raise the flop."
Leave me alone.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, Negreanu was.
I was thinking sort of like it would be funny if Guy was trying to play Daniel's style and just trying to like limp in and like bet 1/5 of the pot and make hero calls on the river every time. Like how well would like playing Daniel's style work for someone like Guy?
Calls out exactly what he has and then calls anyways.
Not a good strategy.
No.
Yeah, I mean, again, like a guy like Guy's a good example. Like he was playing very tight. He really was, especially on the second bullet. I can't verify on the first bullet, but. Again, it was kind of that style where people were playing very tight, and then you would occasionally see some like mega spaz in like each spot. Like if you look at how Dan Shack busted, and you looked at a couple of the other hands, that was kind of how play was, like very, very tight, and then just like some very, very large like, what was that? Back to tight. Yeah, that's kind of how it was.
Sounds like a good time. So I want to ask you about your switch from poker to the finance world, but just
sure.
A quick question before we get into the nuts. Well, this morning I'm at the hockey rink watching my kid play, and there's another buddy of mine. He's a finance guy, and I said, "Oh, hey, we're having a hedge fund guy on the show today. What kind of question should I ask him? Maybe just I'll ask him a question out of the blue, and he'll be like, "Whoa, impressed that I asked this question." So he said to ask him, "Is Alpha dead?"
Well,
I don't even know what it means.
Yeah. So listen, this has been an absolute disaster for hedge funds the last few years. And, I mean, I think it's really important, especially for people that don't know, to have a little context. So hedge funds started up. I guess they started up like in the 60s or 70s technically, but they really got going in the 90s and the 2000s. And by and large, they were not like massive funds. They were, call it like anywhere between 50 million and maybe a couple billion were the big ones. And like you had a whole bunch of hedge funds that were sort of 300 million, 400 million, and they did really, really well. And there's other things going on why they did well, but like for example, right now, like interest rates are basically zero, and the central banks have, basically in some ways distorted markets a little bit. Like in Japan, for example, the central bank buys stocks every day. There's a lot of weird stuff going on in markets, but just back up, like hedge funds used to be very small and very nimble relative to the bigger pie, and the results were very, very good. And then 2008 rolled around. Overall, hedge funds did pretty well in 2008 versus the market. You would expect hedge funds to do well in an environment where the market is really, really badly, at least outperform. But then this guy named Bernie Madoff came along, and if you're not familiar with him, Bernie Madoff ran this massive Ponzi scheme.
Sure.
And billions of dollars were lost. The New York Mets, my baseball team, got total, the financials of that team got victimized. Groups of Jewish charities got destroyed, and
Basically, if you look at that moment in time, after Bernie Madoff, pretty much everyone that put money in hedge funds wanted much higher levels of due diligence for hedge funds. So, like, they wanted a chief compliance officer. They wanted to see, like, all sorts of, they wanted you to get an audit. And all that stuff makes a ton of sense. But what ended up happening was a lot of the money that that went into hedge funds went into the biggest hedge funds.
Right.
So think about it, if you're an investor, right? You're like, okay, like, I can invest with Caption Partners, which is a promising small hedge fund, or some super established big hedge fund that will 100% not Bernie Madoff me.
Right.
So all the money flew into these big hedge funds, and these hedge funds, when an average hedge fund used to be like $500 million. Now the average hedge fund, there's 600 hedge funds now that have over $1 billion, and a lot of them have like $10 billion or more than that. And it just gets very challenging when you're sitting on $10 billion to do anything that cool. It's tough, and I think that's what you've seen you've seen this cycle where hedge funds were small and well, and then they got really, really, really big, and now they're doing badly. And so when you say is alpha dead, like, what we focus on with my hedge fund is a really small strategy. So we have about $100 million now. We can allocate about $150 to $200 million in our strategy. That just that, without knowing anything else about what I do, you at least have to understand there's a lot less competition in what I'm doing than what other people are doing. It's like playing small stakes, triple draw versus heads up, no limit, high stakes. It's like comparing those things. And so I don't think alpha is like permanently dead, and I think it's a bad time for hedge funds now. But what you're seeing is sort of good things that are happening, which is that hedge funds are shutting down. A lot of people are throwing in the towel. Investors are pulling their money out. They're asking for better terms. They're asking for lower fees. All that makes total sense. So I think here's where we are. Like, the fewer hedge funds there are, the better the remaining ones are going to do. And I kind of think we're in a really ugly part of the cycle right now. And it's really about survival for a lot of these bigger hedge fund firms out there.
And just for people who don't, can you quickly give us a definition of alpha, or what alpha is?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
That's okay.
Oh, this is so good. I love the part of the show where Adam asks a question that he can't understand the answer to.
Yeah, standard. This is every week. Where have you been, Terrence?
Yeah, I mean, the simple way of thinking about alpha is sort of like beta adjusted, volatility adjusted outperformance. So say I run a strategy and it has a 10% one standard deviation move. That's my strategy. That's the volatility. 1 year, one standard deviation move is 10%. And the market is doing also a roughly, the market's been a little bit higher than this historically, but let's just say for the sake of this, also a 10 standard deviation is one standard deviation. You would look at sort of over time, if the market is 7 or 8% and I'm doing 9 or 10%, your alpha would be 2 or 3%. So alpha is basically a measurement of risk-adjusted outperformance, and you have to adjust for volatility, and then after you've adjusted for that, how much you're outperforming the market. And so that's what hedge funds were built upon. They were built upon this idea that they'll outperform the market over the long term, and if they're telling you the truth, then you should be able to calculate alpha, which is outperformance, and it should be a positive number.
You should do a Khan Academy video for what a hedge fund is.
That was pretty good.
That was fantastic. I actually understood it.
You're better. How much better you are than the market.
That's right.
Adjusted for volatility.
Dumb question.
I think the thing about finance is that like people use all these like fancy words, but if I'm talking to a poker player or someone who understands poker, I can pretty much explain any concept that's relevant in finance because most of it's pretty simple. It's just the vocabulary takes a little while to develop, and people use words like alpha because they want to sound like they're really smart, but it's really a pretty simple concept.
You left poker for the investment industry, sort of. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like you were sort of at the top of the food chain in poker. You were playing 25-50 PLO, no limit hold'em, I believe. You were at, If
I was playing PLO, you wanted to be in that game.
Yeah, sorry, not PLO. But it seemed like you were doing really well, and all of a sudden you were gone. That doesn't happen a lot, right, in the poker world. When somebody's at the top of the poker food chain, it's this illusion of easy money. It's never going to stop. I can make $100,000 a month, or fill in whatever it is, and extrapolate. But obviously people get trapped, and their kind of life goes by a little bit, maybe. But you seem to get out of that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, there's some good luck involved there because like for example, I was like one of the chip leaders on the main event when I was 21 years old, pretty late, and I busted out on day 5. But if I had like made a real run and made some real money, maybe I wouldn't have taken the path that I took. So there's a lot of, just like everything, there's like a ton of luck involved, and it's very interesting, sort of the path dependency like life has. But I basically was very lucky because I was looking for a job I wasn't actually looking for a job. The truth was, like, I didn't think anyone would hire me because I went to a good school. I went to Duke. I double majored in engineering. I had mediocre grades. I didn't really stand out academically. Like, I was fine, but I didn't really stand out academically, and I'd just been playing a ton of poker. And my plan was to play poker professionally when I graduated. And this was 2007 is when I graduated. But basically, my mentality was, if I could get a job on Wall Street, I didn't know a lot about Wall Street at that time, but I knew that it was a young person's game, and I knew that, like, if I was like 30 and looking to get involved in Wall Street, it's much harder than when you're 21. So my mentality was, if I got a job on Wall Street, I might as well check it out. I can always go back to poker. That was my mentality. So it was kind of abrupt because I was doing really well in poker up until I started work. But I basically took the mentality of, okay, I'm going to take this job. If I love it, I'm going to stay with it. If I don't like it, I'm going to go back to poker. And then 2008 rolled around, and I really thought I was going back to poker because, I was working at Morgan Stanley. I thought it might all be over. I remember calling up my mom and being like, "Hey, Mom, like, I gave this a shot. Like, the whole financial system crumbles. Like, you can't give me shit now if I go back to poker." So I mean, and it obviously didn't. It came back, and so yeah, I mean, that was my whole mentality, and I always thought poker was there. But then while I was working, I saw poker just crumble. Poker went from UIGEA in 2006, which was kind of like a bummer when you couldn't play on party poker anymore, and then obviously you go to Black Friday, and that's much more severe things. And then even more recently, you see, I had friends that were making their living on Bodog, and now that's even like you just sort of seen this like slow death. And obviously, once the market recovered in 2009 and 2010, and I started trading my own book at Morgan Stanley. Like, I never really thought I would go back to poker, but at the very beginning, it was always in the back of my head, like, oh, if this goes badly, I'll just go back to poker. And poker wouldn't be there for me if I needed it now, probably. I mean, I don't. Poker just seems so tough right now. I got very lucky in that whole thing.
What was it like that day in 2008 when the market crashed? Some of the big investment banks, it looked like we're going to be gone forever. I mean, can you kind of think about that day, and was it you just walking around in a daze, like trying to figure out if the world was going to burn? Like, it must have been, I've seen movies and read books and stuff, but to be in the middle of it must have been amazing.
Yeah, it was amazing, and it was amazing from a number of levels. One is just sort of working at an investment bank during what you knew was a historic time. Like you knew you were in the middle of something that people were going to write textbooks about and things like that, and that was exciting to me. What was also exciting was I was trading options during that time, so I got to see things that, were like basically mathematically like should never happen. Like the odds of 2008 happening in the options market is like 1 in 50 trillion or something like that. Obviously those odds are always wrong because a lot of what's mispriced in financial markets are these tail events. But yeah, it was like a multi-hundred standard deviation event, which obviously is possible. So I got to see some things in the options market that I'll always remember the rest of my life, and I'll always remember what can happen. But yeah, I mean, I think what you're referring to is Lehman Brothers. Lehman Brothers in October 2008 collapsed, and that was ugly as hell. And we all thought that customers were pulling their money out of all the investment banks, including Morgan Stanley, where I was at, and we knew it was really bad. And they kept holding meetings, telling us everything was okay. After the fact, we found out that while they were telling us everything was okay, the CEO told his wife he thought it was all over. Wow. So you kind of get a glimpse of what was actually happening. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, the government bailed out, AIG and a lot of banks and provided liquidity for the banks, because the problem is like the money wasn't there. Like they needed money to like settle trades and run operations, and and when all these customers were pulling money out, and it looked like it was just all over. Classic run on the bank situation. So, yeah, I mean, it was really, really fascinating, and I did have the mentality of like, it wasn't that bad for me. You know, like I was sitting next to people who were losing, you know, had family, had kids, had a bunch of Morgan Stanley stock, for example. You know, those people were making, you know, were going through hell.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a weird environment to be in. Like, I was fine. I had poker money. At that moment in time, I could go back to poker. I thought I would be fine, and I thought it'd be a great experience. And so, like 2008, you know, I remember I took all my friends out to the most expensive restaurant in New York City. Well, one of them. It was called Per Se. It's like one of these like Thomas Keller tasting menu like type places.
Yeah.
And I went there in 2008. It was an empty restaurant. It was like now you couldn't get a reservation if your life depended on it, but I remember that day very well. You know, it's the end of the year, 2008. Everyone was bummed. I was like, you know what? Let's just do something stupid. No one else is doing stuff like this now. We went out to the nicest restaurant in New York City, which was totally empty. Had this really nice, like, 10-course meal. I mean, I honestly, like, I think back on that, like, I was very fortunate to be in the right seat. Like, I didn't have everything on the line. I had a lot to learn. I was really young. Like, in terms of, like, seeing something like that, I had great timing.
Yeah. I wanted to, you know, we talk about these sort of compare and contrast between playing poker for a living and you know, being in the finance industry. You know, you were a trader and then subsequently, you know, now you run your own shop. But I mean, one of the things that sort of people always say about poker is that in a sense it's sort of more honest than the financial markets, because I mean, you look at all these guys on finance playing with other people's money. You know, in some sense, you know, we talked about Lehman Brothers and we talked about all this stuff. Like, people are free rolling, you know, using other people's money and just sort of hoping that it comes out. Whereas in poker, you can, you know, unless you're able to sort of borrow money from, you know, well, obviously we know some people who just borrow money from everybody and get staked and sell 120% of them. You know, there's some, you know, not to say there's not people doing stuff like this in poker, but certainly not on a grand scale. For the most part, if you play poker for a living, you actually have to make good decisions and manage a bankroll properly. You know, can you talk about, you know, you know, from both sides of the poker table, like, you know, sort of what's been your experience, you know, in your, you know, your first career and now your current career?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you in many sense. Like, I think that the poker pros that have been around for 10 years, I would trust those guys with a loan or with whatever more than I would trust pretty much anyone. I mean, I think the level of integrity within the high stakes poker community is really high, especially now because all the bad apples have weeded out and there aren't that many new apples these days. And so, that being said, you know, my experience is that, you know, in what I do for a living, right? What I do for a living right now is I run a hedge fund. There's two aspects to it, right? One of it is fundraising and one of it is the trading part of it. And obviously nothing really works out if you're not trading and making money. Then nothing really, it's all the sales in the world doesn't really help you. But like for me, like my integrity is everything. Like if I do one little shady thing, if I get some inside information and I trade off of it, I had a buddy at Morgan Stanley who went to jail for white collar crime. Like, I'm in a job where
you knew the one guy that went to jail? No, I'm kidding.
Well, yeah. I mean, he didn't go to jail for like the financial crisis. He went to jail for like essentially what came down to like reckless trading, actually.
Gotcha.
Sorry. But yeah. I mean, listen. The way I look at it is, I think there are pockets all over the place where there's really bad people. You know, like, I don't know if any of you guys have had like a financial advisor, but like that industry is completely screwed up. You know, like a financial advisor, like my parents had a financial advisor. He got 1% of their money every year, and he also behind the scenes, like whenever he went, he would sell them products that he would be getting a kickback off of.
Oh man.
There are bad apples everywhere, all over this industry, and I think it's just like anything. Like you need to work with the right people, and I don't think there's as much like the hedge fund industry gets a lot of shit, but the hedge fund industry is very brutal. Like if you do badly, your investors ask for their money back, and you're out of business. Like in terms of like where you want to be, in terms of like where I think there's the least amount of like heads I win, tails you lose situations. Sure, there are definitely hedge funds that you can only flip that coin once, is what I'm trying to get to. Like, if you're the kind of person that really is trying to set up the biggest coin flip of your life, where you get the upside and not the downside, you really only get to flip that coin once. And so people that run their hedge funds like that, they either run well and you never hear about it because everyone's happy, or they're out of the game. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what there is to say other than there's some really bad people in all sorts of different industries. I'm in Oklahoma City, where there's some great people that do oil and gas companies here, and there's also a lot of people that do oil and gas companies that you wouldn't want to invest with. I think it's like that in every industry. There's really high integrity people and there's low integrity people. I'm not of the belief that directing anger towards a random employee at a Wall Street bank during the financial crisis is really a wise decision. There's a very small the financial crisis was a very big thing, driven by the housing market collapsing is the first thing that collapsed. There are definitely people that were within a system where they had a lot to win and not a lot to lose, and that took advantage of it. But like a lot of people, like it's almost like the game that was set up was wrong versus the players that were taking advantage of it were wrong. I was never in a spot where we were doing that, but you can read The Big Short and things like that. There are all sorts of mortgage brokers and things like that were really pushing it. Like when you're selling a home loan to somebody that has no credit history and makes $40,000 a year, and you're selling them a home for $800,000 in Phoenix, it does take certain types of crappy morals to do those type of things. But if you're a trader at a bank and your boss is pushing you to make money and take risk, make money, take risk, and one day you blow up and you lose a lot of money and get fired, there's all sorts of hard situations to deal with. And I think in my career I've seen really great people in the finance industry that are at banks, that are at hedge funds, and I've seen some really scummy people. And I just think that's the way life is. Like, and I think poker's the same thing. Like, I mean, Terrence, you can relate. I mean, how many idiots have you lent money to that didn't pay you back? Like, I've unfortunately had a lot of that happen to me.
Yeah, Adam and I were just talking about this and how we're getting better at it now. At least it hasn't. We're happy now that it hasn't happened in a while. Yeah.
Right. Well, it's probably because poker's also like slowly dying, right? Like if poker was booming, you would see more and more of that kind of thing.
Sure.
I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think in general there are a lot of industries that are screwed up out there, and sometimes I think for sure hedge funds, a lot of times they publish the list of sort of like top 10 earners in hedge funds, and you'll see these guys that are making $1 billion. Most of the guys that have made a lot of money in hedge funds, like for example George Soros, his name, he makes $1 billion once in a while every year or whatever, and most of that money is his returns on his own money that he's made over the years, and a lot of the really successful guys in hedge funds have really made their investors like a ton of money. There are just not that many guys that have like gamed the system. But yeah, they're. I'm not trying to come out here like speaking the holy war here. Like there's all sorts of bad apples everywhere.
No, for sure.
But
yeah. For sure. I want to end on one more positive note. Just one more question for you. We know you tomorrow's Monday morning, and you got to be there when that bell sounds.
Yeah,
and,
true.
Make that money. But I do want to ask you. Adam alluded to it a little bit earlier, but you're the guy who got out sort of around the peak of the poker boom. You said it was a little bit of luck. Whether how much luck or how much foresight. But we interview people on this show pretty much every week who are professional poker players, and a lot of them have said to us, yeah, I'm doing pretty well, but I don't want to be doing this for the rest of my life. What's your sort of advice for I think finance is a natural thing for poker players to go into because of what you said earlier about it's pretty easy to understand relative to poker. But what's your advice for those people who are sort of professional poker players and looking to make this transition into finance or anything else?
Yeah, well, I probably get like maybe every 2 weeks a message on 2+2 where the question is something like that, like, hey, I'm in poker, I'd love some advice on how to transition out, and and there's really a lot of factors at play. I mean, I think the first thing is your age. Unfortunately, like the older you are, there's just different opportunity sets for your age. Like if you're 23, 24, 25, or you're 45, 46, 47, and I've talked to people all over that spectrum, the opportunity set's just different. And also like where you are in your life with your family, like how much risk you can take, all that stuff really matters. But yeah, I mean, I think the real thing is that, you know, I don't think trading is for every poker player, and I think a lot of poker players get sucked into some sort of day trading type of thing, which my generic advice would be, if you're transitioning away from poker, is if someone asks you to put up your own money on day one for some sort of trading venture, don't do it.
Stop.
And that happens where like people are like, yeah, come on my platform, come trade, you'll be amazing at it, and you know you have to put up the capital to start. Like I've actually seen a lot of people do that. So yeah, the number one is, if you're transitioning away from poker, you need to find a spot where you can learn. That's the number one thing. And the learning curve, and people who play poker are used to a very quick learning curve, in my opinion. Like, it's not that finance is more complicated. It's just that there's a lot more variables in the equation. You know, there's a very finite set of things that can happen in a poker hand. And when it comes to markets, there's just the depth and the sort of the things that can happen are much more varied, in my opinion. And so I think that it takes time. It takes at least a couple of years to sort of break in and feel comfortable. So the key is, when you're transitioning, is to find someone that's going to teach you. And that might sound really obvious, but like a lot of poker players like think they can read a book and then start day trading, and that's just a really bad idea. So I tend to steer people away from day trading, and I tend to steer them more towards, can you go work for an institution or a trading company or a bank or a hedge fund? Can you get a job there where someone's going to be willing to teach you? Because basically the key to finance is really just breaking in, and you don't have to break in the perfect spot. But once you sort of break in and figure out what's going on, then you can find out like where you actually want to work. And that's the other thing I tell people. It's just find someone doing something very interesting or reasonable that's willing to teach you. And even if it's not the perfect job for you, you can sort of figure it out once you break in. So, yeah, it really comes down to networking, and it really comes down to asking for help. And because the truth is, like, I think a lot of, and just beyond sort of trading, which is the world I know, like even like investing, you know, a lot of, I mean, I've seen the path that I think makes a lot of sense for poker players too is apply to business school and then go the sort of more conventional route. You know, like I've seen a lot of younger poker players that have done well. They go to business school, then they go get a job in consulting or in banking or in venture capital or something, private equity, something like that. You know, I have a friend, Jeff Williams, who's a great example. He was a guy that had a lot of success in poker when he was younger. Sure. He ended up going back to business school. Now he's working in venture capital. You know, I think that path is really good, but I think the important thing to realize is it's not as quick as poker. It's not like you can just drop everything and study poker, and you can make some real progress that way. It's really like harder in this world to do that. So just when you go at it, don't try to find the 2+2 of trading. Don't try to find the 2+2 of investing. Don't try to find the book to read that'll help you figure it out. It's not like that.
You just got that kills people's dreams. Everybody just wants to get rich quick. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed. And it's not.
Jason, thanks so much for spending some time with us talking about the big one for One Drop and the investment industry. A lot of fun. Thanks so much, and hope your week goes well.
Sure, and if any of your listeners have any sort of career questions, just shoot me an email. It's just jason@captionpartners.com. I'm happy to answer any questions. If anyone has more specifics, because I'm happy to help poker players out any way I can. So if anyone wants to chat or ask me a few questions, that's easy way to do it.
You might have just you might want to schedule your whole week off now for answering emails.
All right. Well, I will. If that happens, that happens. But I'm happy to do it.
Thanks so much. Really appreciate it, Jason. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, that was one of my favorite interviews in a long time. That was fun.
Mm-hmm. He didn't talk about William Kassouf once.
Well, we didn't get a chance to ask him. We ran out of time before we got to the Kassouf question.
Yeah.
Well, that's the funny thing. You and I were just saying, like, we got so much response in the show thread to the Kassouf
Right.
interview.
I think I was looking at, I was doing the going to the Pokercast forum and sorting by number of replies.
Yeah.
And it's like twice as many as like the next most popular episode.
And that interview to me with Jason was much more interesting than Kassouf, and nobody's gonna we'll get a few comments, but it'll be nowhere near what
because Jason's not out there, just there trying to promote himself and all this kind of stuff. But he
doesn't infuriate everybody.
He doesn't tilt everybody, and we don't have to have multiple points of view. He's just out there going, there's some shady people in the financial world, but there's
some good people.
Not everybody.
Too. We got some more Kassouf talk. We'll get to that in segment 2 from the coverage this week from the ESPN. Some more stuff in case you missed it to get to in segment 2. Segment 3, we've got Chris Kruk from Run It Once come and give us a couple No Limit Hold'em. We haven't talked No Limit Hold'em in forever.
What's that?
He's a 6-max No Limit Hold'em guy. You only get 2.
Only 7?
And you can use just one of them.
And you can bet, how much?
More than the pot.
Unlimited.
The most you can raise is more than the
size of the pot. Patrick's probably can't play.
I don't know how that works.
Should be fun. So we'll do that in a minute. You're listening to the 2+2 Pokercast presented by runitonce.com. More right after this.
Hey, Pokercast fans. Don't forget to follow me, Adam, and Ross on the old social medias. I'm at TChanPoker on Twitter, and once in a while I'll even talk poker if I'm not trying to hit him in the face. If Adam ever gets home from hockey practice, he tweets at PokerCast Adam, and Ross is at PokerCast Ross whenever he's sweating the Chicagos. Hit us up and try to keep it to 140 or less. Fewer.
Hey, poker fans, don't forget about the 2plus2.com digital magazine. Each month, a wide array of poker professionals and media write fascinating articles about the game you love. Want to learn about big blind versus small blind hand ranges? How about optimal Jeopardy daily double strategy? Topics like those and many others are covered every month. Head on over to 2plus2.com to see what the magazine has to offer this month.
Hey, it's Mike from the 2plus2 store and professionalpoker.com. 2plus2 is pleased to announce the release of their most anticipated book in ages, Applications of No Limit Hold'em, a guide to understanding theoretical sound poker by Matthew Jonda. This book will give you the ability to create the bet sizings and ranges which will beat the better players. The theory in this book is not designed to be complex or abstract, but rather it's intended to be applied immediately, producing better overall results. Many confusing concepts, such as overbetting, balancing multiple bet sizing ranges, donk betting, and check raising as a pre-flop raiser, are crucial to a player's strategy, despite few players implementing them or talking about them. And after reading this book, you should be able to not only conceptually understand these ideas, but also know how to begin incorporating them into your game, and thereby successfully compete against tough opponents. And at the 2plus2 store, we accept all credit cards, plus PayPal and NetTeller.
Welcome back to the 2+2 Pokercast, presented by runitonce.com. Let's get more into the In Case You Missed It. This week on the coverage at ESPN of the World Series of Poker main event, the coverage did continue. And it was gang-up week on William Kassouf, to put it mildly. The table, Cliff Josephie, Gordon Vayo, and others, Jared Blesnick, were all over Kassouf, ganging up on him, calling the clock. And look, the ganging up on him and calling the clock as soon as it's on him, I get that. That's what he gets for wasting time.
Yeah.
Part of the byproduct of stalling and doing all the things that he does means you get called on you immediately. I got no issue with that. Plus, floorman should be standing there, and if it's his MO to sit there and not look at his cards and think, he should be even harsher.
He should be clocked instantly.
Yeah, there shouldn't be this waiting period. However, when you get together with all the players at the table, make fun of his buy-in level. Blesnick is saying, "I'll stake you in the $10 rebuys." He's playing for He's always, this is the biggest one he's ever played for. Well, obviously, it's the biggest one you've played for too, Jared. By the way, but just giving him a hard time because he doesn't usually play 10Ks.
Right.
Cliff Josephie calling him a clown on several occasions. Gordon Vayo saying that he brought a woman to tears earlier in the main event, and now he's picking on him because he brought a woman to tears. He didn't bring a woman to tears. We all saw the Stacey Madison thing. She wasn't crying. There was no "you're a bitch" or giving you a reason to this woman to cry. So this kind of stuff didn't make me feel good watching it. I'm thinking, I get why they're upset with this guy, but this is not the way to deal with it.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because a lot of a lot of this, the sort of discussion, and there's another item. Jack Effel, by the way, has just finally kind of broken silence on this one. He did an interview with Poker News, and you can look that up, and we can mention it a bit later. But I mean, he mentions that one of the things is that this guy's crossing the line. He's hurting. We're talking about William Kassouf, that he's sort of way over the line, and he's aggressive, and he's making it personal on people. Well, clearly, like, other people are doing that back to him.
Yep.
So is there a double standard at play? Is it sort of the fact that, like, oh, this guy was the villain first, and that the retribution is therefore okay? I mean, if you're sort of, Jack likes to talk about creating an environment that where people feel welcome. Well, obviously this is not that environment for William Kassouf at this point.
No, and there was another thing that bothered me. There's a hand where I can't remember the guy's name, but he is in a pot. He shoves on William, and William goes into the tank, and goes through his act. And Cliff says to the guy after the hand, he goes, "We're all in this." He makes a comment like, "We're all in the same team here," because he spoke up for him against William, called him a clown, whatever.
Right.
And then after the pot is over, he said to him, "We're all in the same team." And I'm thinking, don't say stuff like that.
Yeah, especially the one guy who should know better.
Exactly.
The one guy who's been around poker for forever.
And it's going to be in the World Series of Poker main event coverage.
Yeah.
And people who don't have a clue are going to be watching that going, they're teaming up on him now.
Yeah,
Look at this.
They're actively colluding on it. Even though clearly in their play they're not colluding against him. Like, obviously that would never be acceptable.
No, he means by calling the clock and that kind of thing, we're on the same team. But people aren't going to see that.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, that really kind of bothered me a lot. And then in that same hand where William opens, the guy shoves, William's thinking about calling, going through his act, and it's bored. It's boring. His act is the same every time, whatever. Right. But the floor man comes over, and while he's waiting, starts giving him a hard time, saying, and he says to him, one player to a hand, because William's asking the guy, I think you got ace king here. I think it's a race. William had 2 3s. He's like, do you want me to call? Do you want, his normal act? And the floorman says, and it's not Jack, I can't remember the guy's name, he says one player to a hand. I'm thinking, what is that? What that means no sense to me. What are you talking about, one player to a hand?
He's not asking somebody for advice.
Right. So then Jack comes over and he starts giving him a hard time about talking to the player while he's all in. And again, I get, and how Jack argues, he doesn't really listen to what the person's saying or explaining. He's just sitting there to try and tell him exactly what's going to happen. I get it. He's busy. He's running around the main event. But make it seem a little bit more like you're listening to the guy's explanation.
Well, I guess there's how many tables left at this point? I mean, I think this is
only like 3. Yeah.
Yeah, this is basically his job at this point. But
yeah.
I mean, he's, I'm sure at this point, like, Jack sort of reached his boiling point. He's fed up with William Kassouf.
And Jack gets to his boiling point pretty quickly.
Yeah,
let's face it.
I agree.
Yeah. So again, I don't want to stand here and be the guy who's defending William Kassouf to the end, but this kind of stuff is not right.
Yeah.
I get what he does is not right, the stalling and all that.
Right.
But he's not doing
the 2
it.
wrongs definitely not making
exactly.
it right. Yeah. That was awesome.
I knocked my.
That was fantastic.
I got so excited. I knocked my microphone.
The hand gesture knocked off your headset, which is.
It's not like somebody like Jared Blesnick is a pillar for amazing.
That's a great point.
Exactly.
Yeah,
we got a guy who got banned from the World Series.
I mean, honestly, yeah. Like, if I'm going to take one guy's behavior over another, it's like
pretty easily.
Also, I don't know if you saw that hand in it was like episode 3 of the coverage this year, where Jared Blesnick, the seasoned pro, makes quads and totally freaks out when the guy calls him when he goes all in
his face.
It's like screaming in his face that he has quads. It's like, yo,
fantastic.
Yeah, so let's not talk
act
about
like
behavior.
You've been there.
Yeah. So again, the stalling stuff, we've been on record again. We hate it. He's not, but the table talk stuff, I get he might be going too far, but it's not malicious. There's no, my God, you're terrible. How did you push in that spot? It's the same act over and over again.
Yeah.
And if you just don't respond to it, whatever, right? I think. But, again, this divides everybody. Somebody's, you either hate him or you don't love him, but you either hate him or you understand the guy.
You hate him or you kind of
enjoy it.
You hate him or you tolerate him, I think is where we're at.
It seems like it, yeah. But anyway.
Is that it for the William Kassouf Hour this week?
No, it's this week, but next week apparently it goes even crazier, so we'll see.
Awesome. By the way, just a quick mention, Poker News did a great interview, I thought, with Jack Effel.
Okay.
Check that out. It's over at Poker News. You can search Jack Effel, William Kassouf interview. I'm sure
he talks
you'll find
about it.
He mentions about a bunch of things in it. He's He actually, I think, for his hard time, as we often give Jack, I think he comes out very well, kind of explaining his thought process and his action on it this week. So yeah, check that out.
No, yeah. Speaking of, as far as giving Jack a hard time, Jack does a great job managing the World Series of Poker.
He's not perfect.
It's about the hardest job in poker, right?
I mean, agree with that. Yeah,
7,000 people. He's got a team to manage. None of them can make a mistake because it shows up on him if they do.
For sure.
And he's got to manage it. He does a great job. There's in every walk of life when somebody's doing, there's always something he's under the microscope, and there's stuff that you would like him to do differently.
Right.
But
it's one of the things that he says in the interview is sort of like, it's like the referee in sports. It's like the best case scenario is when nobody notices you.
Right.
Then that's sort of the thing. Like if you're a referee in a major sport and nobody knows your name, that's probably a good thing.
We'll get back to more in case you missed it in a second, but a quick note from one of our sponsors this week. This is sharkscope.com. Are you using a poker tracker? Are you using tracking software while playing online poker? If the answer is no, you really need to look at starting to, because many of your opponents are using site-sanctioned software to see in-depth information about you as you're playing them in real time. Now it's time for you to even the playing field, announcing the Sharkscope Desktop, the only stat tracker that shows both hand history-based statistics and all the Sharkscope stats combined into one head-up display incorporated right over the online poker table you're playing. This invaluable tool is available to buy in a standalone version, or you can get it free with a silver or gold Sharkscope subscription. Find out all the details at sharkscope.com. Sharkscope.com, the best for over 10 years. Track your statistics, avoid the sharks, and find easier tournaments at sharkscope.com. In case you missed it, the Phil Ivey Borgata decision came down this week. So if you think back a couple of years when this happened, this is the edge sorting baccarat situation.
Mysterious Asian female.
That we know a name now. Chen Young's Sun is her name. It came out in the court documents. Basically what happened was they went to the Borgata. Just a quick recap. They knew the patterns on the edges of a certain make of cards. They asked the Borgata to have the cards positioned one way, so they thought it was. They said it was their superstition, and they were sitting there, and they won $9 million, $9-point-something million, I believe, from the Borgata, and got paid. And then the Borgata found out what was going on and sued them. And this has gone and been in the courts for some time now. The ruling came down, and Phil Ivey was found guilty. Well, Phil and his partner were found guilty of breach of contract, of all things. And the contract is this nebulous thing that casinos are supposed to have the best of it. Was essentially what the judge ruled, that because
that's the contract.
Because
I didn't sign that fucking contract. Let me tell you that right now.
Exactly. So the judge ruled that because of the fact that they were in breach of contract, because the casino did not have the best of it in this situation, and that's how they're built and how they make money, and people know that.
That is the most asinine ruling I've ever heard.
It's insane.
And it's really unfortunate that that's now a precedent that's been set.
Well, it's another precedent, so it's gone both ways now once. I'm sure it'll get appealed, and we'll see how far they're going to take it. $10 million is a lot of money, plus I would imagine $1 million or $2 million in legal fees that he's going to lose.
That is
for
fucking
as well.
idiotic. So, this judge has basically ruled that the second you walk into a casino, you have tacitly agreed to bend over, unzip your pants, and take it up the ass from the casino.
Essentially, yeah.
And if you do anything other than that, you're in violation of it.
You're in violation of contract.
Wow.
So
what fucking judge is that? Oh my god.
That's a no good
Judge Noel Hillman. Go write a letter to District Court Judge Noel Hillman and tell him to get his head up his fucking ass.
And look, I don't know, but it would seem like the American system of electing judges, judges taking money for their campaigns, you got to believe that the Borgata has some sort of supportive position of all these. Why do you elect judges? It makes no sense to me why you elect judges.
Yeah,
you just invite this kind of thing. But anyways, but the question is, we're talking about 10, 12 million interest penalties, legal fees. If Phil loses this, that's a serious chunk of change. Do you think Phil Ivey has 12 million kicking around to be paying this off? Right? I mean, who knows? Poker world is not.
Maybe
what
if it's looking bad against him, he should just gamble it all.
Go in and put it
on
red.
Free roll.
Yeah, exactly, and then get sued again when he wins. All right, moving on. In case you missed it, Dan Bilzerian has a new bet with Bill Perkins. He's got a new prop bet, and this one is $5 million for Dan if he can row solo across the Atlantic Ocean.
It's just a free roll. There's no other side of this because it's a Bill Perkins prop bet, I guess.
It's like, it's a Bill just is paying people to go put on a monkey hat and go over there. And
he is really just like a modern day,
puppeteer.
Like, dance for my amusement, boy.
It really is, right? At this point, I don't know.
He doesn't do it for regular people. He only does it for
rich
people.
I don't know if it didn't say in the Poker News. I think it was Poker News in the article if Dan is betting any money or if it's a free roll or what it is. I would imagine Bill's got to have like $1 million to win or something.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think.
Did he for the Rast bet, right? Like,
he had a. It was
there was upside, right? Yeah,
like that.
Yeah. So I mean, there's got to be something there.
Dan said he lost a few million playing poker this year, and he wants to win the bet to get even. Which it brings new. If you guys have been there, you've been stuck before, and think, wow, if the poker gods let me get even in this session, I will do X. I'll go to the gym tomorrow, or I'll go to the gym every day for a week. But you don't often think, like, if they get, poker gods let me get even, I'll row across the Atlantic.
I'm looking it up. There's not that many people that have done it.
No, I think Dan said there's as many people that have walked or have been to outer space that have done this.
Yeah, I mean... Yeah, so
it's not a lot.
There aren't very many. Like, they each have their own Wikipedia entry.
Do they really?
Bilzerian already does too. But presumably these people have them for rowing related accomplishments.
Dan does not.
I assume he'd be followed by a yacht and
probably.
I mean, there's some. Yeah, he would have some advantages over like regular people who are going to try it. We all know he's very creative.
Is he going to get a yacht to
the yacht
sail?
Well, I think after the whole LA to Vegas bike bet incident,
Bill's going to be a little harsher.
Yeah, he's going to be a little, have to think outside the box and try to outsmart Dan on how he's going to get around this particular.
He said he
problem.
thinks it'll take him 3 months to do if he can do it.
I don't know. I have no idea. So picking a random trip, Bhavik Gandhi did it in 186 days.
Wow.
Or 106 days, rather. Katie Spots did it in only 7 days.
What?
No. Yeah.
How would you do it in 7 days? You got to be going.
She must have had some good wins going with her.
She had a sail, obviously.
Charles Hedrick has the record. Set the record in 2007 for going 36 days and 6 hours.
So then the 7 days didn't happen. If Charles has the record of 36 days,
70 days was.
I think you said 7.
Yeah, I heard
70
days.
Also.
70 days. Yeah.
Katie Spots was also the youngest solo rower. She was 22 years old.
Oh, good. There you go. Dan is not the youngest rower, but rower. Hopefully he pulls it off.
Or dies in.
Or dies trying.
Be a fun. I mean, that would be the most Bilzerian way to go, right?
Would be
a prop bet.
In case you missed it, Protection Poker made its debut at the Aria Casino. This is a form of poker that I don't know if you guys did you see what this is all about?
I know basically, the cliff notes.
Yeah, if two players are all in, or if a player is all in and there's no action left, and there's yet to be a card to be turned, or either the flop turn or river to be shown. And one person is a 65% fave when they turn their cards in the back, then he automatically gets 20% of the pot. So he's not going to, if let's say you get jacks versus aces, the guy with aces automatically gets 20, and if the guy with jacks sucks out, he only gets 80% of the pot now. He doesn't get 100%. And Mike Sexton is the celebrity poker endorser of this game called Protection Poker. I love Mike, but I'm not sure what he's thinking here. As far as he is quoted as saying, Protection Poker is the future of poker. In their promotional video, they say Protection Poker does these things: minimizes negative swings, rewards good play, allows players to play longer, decreases player frustration, and evolves poker into a genuine game of skill. Now, I'm not sure it does any of those things, first of all. And second of all, I'm not sure you want to have a casual player who's getting it in bad, first of all, told that he's way behind all the time. And second of all, when he gets it in, he can't win the whole pot anymore. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't make any sense to me.
I honestly can't think of a dumber idea that's been
Thank you. I was
that's
worried
been
there.
involved in terms of game innovation. I'm having a
right?
really hard time figuring out minimizes negative swing. Since everybody's trying to do the opposite, this is atrociously bad, and for the reasons that you cited and more. I can't even.
I don't get
I can't
it.
even articulate.
Me too.
how bad this is.
I was the only one thinking, because I was reading about it. People are Mike's saying all these things, and I'm thinking, wow, this is horrible. Why would you want this? First of all, it's not the future of poker. It's not going to happen, Mike. Sorry, this isn't going to take off. But it just it makes zero sense to me. I don't know why we're doing that. But nonetheless,
that's a
done.
thing. Maybe somebody can tell us why perfection poker is a
thing.
good idea.
In case you missed it, Brad Willis, you wanted to you had something in there.
Yeah, definitely. So he does a really short audio documentary. It's really fun, interesting to listen to. It's about a recreational player's experience at EPT Barcelona. You can find it. It's on the PokerStars blog. I don't know if it's still on the front page, but it's called The New Guy, a recreational poker player's high-stakes journey. It follows a guy named Dan Jones, and this guy is just he's just a regular guy. He ends up playing in the EPT Barcelona.
Satellites his way in.
Satellites his way in. Yeah, I won't spoil it and tell you how he does. But the reason why I wanted to mention it is because I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe last week. Some people mentioned to us that we should interview some of these recreational players as they play a big event. Well, Brad's already done it. He's done a 16-minute, 17-minute, I think, audio documentary style. In the style of sort of This American Life or in Radiolab narrative style, or All In or Knocked Out, as you prefer. So, it's not just an interview, but he actually, talks to this guy before, talks to him during, talks to him after his event ends, and good stuff to listen to. Check it out. Brad was also a former newscaster before he was a PokerStars blogger, so he's got that awesome narrative voice too, and he's got that really sweet Southern accent.
Check that out. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate all your work all the time. Brad's awesome.
Does good stuff.
All right, coming up after the break, we are going to talk to Chris Kruk from RunItOnce.com. He's got a couple of no-limit hold'em hands. We've got some mailbag to get to, some of my hands. So I don't spoil it. Some Ross report to get to after the break. Keep it right here. You're listening to the 2+2 Pokercast, presented by RunItOnce.com. More right after this.
Hey, T-Chan here. Now that you've been listening to me and Adam give you the latest news in the poker world, it's time for you to give your 2 cents. So come hang out with the rest of the Pokercast Nation on the forums at pokercast.2plus2.com. There you can leave feedback about the show, give the world your hot takes on this week's stories, or just leave Rosco your best sports betting advice. He needs the help. That's the forums at pokercast.2plus2.com. The best part? It's available no matter how many miles you are from Kells.
Okay, people. Most of the kittens have perished. There are a few left you can save, though, and here's how to do it. Get involved with the Pokercast by emailing your questions, suggestions for the show, or even record a sound clip. Adam will be using the best ones on the air. Well, let's face it, probably the worst ones as well. I can see you there at your computer. Send an email right now. Totally disagree with one of Adam's takes last week? Send an email. Love last week's interview? Email. Want to know how much cash Adam has on him right now? Email. Pokercast at 2plus2.com is the address. Ship the funny to Adam today.
What's up, guys? If you're serious about online poker tournament statistics, you got to check out Sharkscope.com. They've been the leader in online poker tournament tracking for over 10 years. If you've ever had the experience of being in an online tournament and being worried that your opponent might be a dangerous shark, Sharkscope.com will tell you. And your first 5 searches every day are free. If you log in with your Facebook account, they'll double that to 10 searches. So get on over to Sharkscope.com, track your stats, and improve your win rate today.
Welcome back to the 2+2 Pokercast, presented by RunItOnce.com. We're doing a regular segment here. We're joined by a Run It Once coach. This week it's Chris Kruk. Chris, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. So you're mostly no limit hold'em, 6-max. What's your teaching range? Let's say.
My first contract was for tournaments at the sort of essential level.
Okay.
And I actually just finished my last video, which will be released in about a week, and then I'm going to move up to the elite membership and I'll still do tournament stuff there. Mostly no limit, but a little bit of like ICM stuff for other games, and it'll be tournaments still. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Today we've got a couple of no limit hold'ems. We figured we hadn't talked. We're PLO guys now, Chris. So we end up talking a lot of PLO.
I don't play poker, period. So
Terrence tries to play as little as possible, but Ross and I play the PLO. But we haven't done some no limit hold'em stuff in a while. So we thought we'd pick a couple of hands. Some 6-max Zoom, I believe that you played. We're going to talk through them, and why don't we jump in with that?
Okay, cool. So. The first hand, here's the Queen 6 of Diamonds one.
Yeah.
And so a regular opens it up on the button to 2.5x, and the small blind calls, and we come along too.
You have about 200. Is it 200 big blinds?
Yeah. I'm sitting a little shorter than 200, and we're all deep. The small blind's got 150.
2.5 zoom.
Yes,
yeah,
2.5 zoom.
2.5 zoom. Yeah. So we flop a flush draw, and the recreational player in the small blind just leads for pot, which is obviously, a little weird.
So it comes King 8 deuce. You have the Queen 6 of Diamonds. Comes King 8 deuce with the King 8 of Diamonds. Nice flop for your hand. Second nut flush draw, and you are donked into by the recreational player.
Yeah. He donk leads for pot. So, I think we just have to call. Our hand's obviously way too strong to fold, but I don't really think too many guys are just going to pot lead here and then fold. So I think we have a pretty easy call. And then the regular on the button. The donk lead is for 35, and the regular on the button makes it 88. And the recreational player in the small blind calls as well, or calls again, I guess. And then I think we're just priced in here to try and draw, even though it's already getting pretty dicey.
Is your hand face up to the pro though? There, I guess. We're wondering if a diamond rolls off. I mean, do you have implied odds with the pro there?
I think we're getting towards being face up, but there's definitely some other hands in my range here that I would want to take this line with. I think strong kings like King Jack or King 10 that I didn't squeeze with pre are probably strong enough to call one more bet. I think where our range is pretty weak. Recreational players have a tendency to occasionally do random things. I think it's not totally impossible, especially given the pro's sort of small sizing on the flop, that he's just sort of on a stone cold bluff here every so often. So I think we probably mostly have flush draws, but there's a few other non-flush draws in our range.
Okay, so you've got, again, the Queen 6 of Diamonds, King 8 deuce, 2 diamonds. The turn rolls off after you call, completing the action, rolls off the 9 of hearts.
Right. So now there's 2 flush draws, and the recreational player checks, and we check as well. I don't think we really have any other options here. And the reg on the button bets pretty chunky, 230 into 300. And the recreational player calls.
So now you're getting a price, right?
Right. I think at this point, if we call, our hand's pretty face up, but at the same time, we're almost priced in as long as we can occasionally win some money on the river. And I think, with the second nut flush, with the second nut flush draw, occasionally we'll flush over flush somebody, occasionally we'll just make the flush, and the recreational player will put it in with something else. So I think we are priced in here. Well,
now I want to ask you about lower flush draws, because it feels like second nut flush draw, like you said, you're going to flush over flush people sometimes, but maybe not with the 6 high flush.
Right, yeah, I think I'm probably only calling with... Well, I think the nut flush draw is a pretty obvious call, and I think this one's a fairly obvious call. And then I think if I was going to call with any other flush draw, I'd want either a pair or at least some sort of gut shot to go with it.
Right.
So that I could, back into trips and win occasionally, or hit a disguised straight or something, some percentage of the time.
So you call, again, now the 9 of hearts rolls off, so it's now King 9, 8 deuce, 2 diamonds, 2 hearts. You call, the river is the 10 of diamonds, gin.
Exactly. So this is fantastic for us, obviously. We've now made the second nuts. And the sort of, standard play here is to just check to the guy who is previously aggressive. I think that's a big habit that everyone falls into in No Limit Hold'em. And while it's generally correct, I think this is an important spot to sort of deviate. As we noticed, almost 2 streets ago, our hand's already quite face up as mostly flushes here. So I think if we check, the pro on the button, who's presumably capable of hand reading as well as we can, is going to also recognize this. And he's probably not going to shove anything worse than a flush. Now, if we open jam, he's also probably not going to call anything worse than a flush. So we don't actually gain any value by jamming into him. But that's not really a problem, because in this spot, we're not really supposed to get much of our EV from the pro. We just kind of always have a flush. He kind of always knows it. We always know it. So the only way the money goes in is if somebody's getting coolered here and it's flush over flush. And the money's going to go in no matter what. But if we check, the action just gets checked behind pretty often, and we miss potential value from the recreational, who will always call a flush, even a low one, and may even find a call with some other hands. So I think it's really important to just open shove here when it's checked to us. So I end up doing that for 640 into about 1,000, and fairly unsurprisingly, the button folds. Probably had something, but just realized that we had a flush, and the recreational player is unable to find a fold for his last almost 90 big blinds with King 7 of hearts.
So he's got King no kicker, and he pays you off. I think he picked up a heart draw on the turn, so interesting spot for him. But do you have any non-flush hands in that you would play this way?
Probably not too many. I think it's really hard for me to be bluffing here just because of the nature of the action. When the pot's going to be multi-way and there's a raise multi-way on the flop and then a large turn bet goes in and it's still multi-way because the recreational player called that as well, I think I'm really hard-pressed to have any hands that, call the turn that then want to bluff on this river, because they were either strong enough that they're going to try and show down now, or they made a flush.
Right, so the interesting spot there is the river where, instead of checking to the aggressor, you're chunking off there and getting yourself all in.
Right, exactly. Just focusing on trying to maximize versus the recreational player rather than worrying about balance versus the pro.
Right, okay, cool. Let's go on to hand 2.
Okay, sweet. So in the second hand, we raise it up with Jack of Hearts, Jack of Spades under the gun, and it folds to the big blind, who then calls. So we get the Jack 9-8 with 2 hearts flop, and after he checks, we c-bet half pot, and he calls. And now the turn is a 10, which looks like a pretty bad card, and really is a pretty bad card, and he checks to us. And I think this is a spot where everyone just sort of, they were excited that they had top set on the flop, and now they're kind of less excited because, they still have top set, but there's a lot of straights out there, and so they just check it back, maybe call a river bet, hope the board pairs.
Lose some value from guys with 2 pairs. So, again, the board is Jack 10, 9-8 with 2 hearts. You have top set. The turn roll, the 10's interesting, though. It almost seems like a 7 would be worse, or a queen, or something that because 10 seems more, a 10 in their range seems more likely than a 7, let's say.
Right. He's gonna 2-pair this card significantly more often, and straight up on it, a little less often than, as you pointed out, on, say, the queen or the 7.
So you bet, 50% a pot?
Yeah, so I bet half pot again. And I think this is a really nice play because when the river pairs the board, we're not perceived to have bet any hands that are going to make full houses, because everyone's like, oh, he would have checked because he'd have been scared of the straight.
Right.
So when we bet the turn, when we have a hand like this in our range, it's really possible for villain to get super out of line, being, thinking that we're capped at having a straight. So in this exact hand, after we bet the turn and he calls, the river does pair the 8.
Can we stop for a second? I just wanted to ask you something on the turn. Your analysis makes perfect sense to me why you should continue betting. I think you're absolutely spot on that a lot of people think, oh, my set is more like a draw now. I'll just take the free card and hope I boat up. But the question I wanted to ask you was sort of if the big blind, if the villain in this hand does have, say, just a queen or even king queen right now, like how do you like, what kind of line do you like for him playing this hand against you?
Right, that's a good question. So I think out of the big blind with just a queen, it's a pretty clear turn call. You're going to have a lot of hands that are like pair plus flush draw, 2-pair. You might even have a set that didn't raise the flop, or maybe you turned a set. So you don't want to just turn your hand face up as being a queen. he's sort of doing the exact same thing with a queen as we're doing here with a set. If he raises all of his queens on the turn, then not only does he lose a lot versus king queen when we just get it in, but when we call and the flush comes or the board pairs, now we know that he doesn't have anything nutted.
He's capped his range, yeah.
Exactly. And moreover, when he does call, if we know that this is a guy who just consistently raises queens on the turn, let's say he calls, well, now we know that he's got one of those other hands, 2-pair, a set, a pair and a flush draw, maybe just like the nut flush draw. And so we have a pretty trivial bluff on the river whenever, let's say, the deuce of spades rolls off. So I think definitely with just a queen, he's got to just call to protect his range. With king queen, I think the same argument mostly applies, but there's also a little bit of there's something to be said that like most guys aren't really folding a queen here, so you just kind of bomb it nice and big and then hope to get a clean river, and maybe you can do that a little exploitably, like especially versus weaker players.
Do you think the big blind has any sort of donking frequency here when the turn comes to 10?
I think it's potentially a spot where he should. I think in practice that's just not something that happens in no limit much.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting spot to do it, and I think it's definitely, well, not definitely, but I think there's a reasonable chance that it's part of, let's say, a GTO equilibrium or whatever.
Gotcha.
So I want to ask you about sizing, Chris. When you bet half on the turn with the 4-card straight top set, I want to ask you about your half pot bet there. Are you trying to set up for, like, first of all, if he check raises you, that you're going to get priced in if you bet smaller? Like, what's your thought process with the half pot bet there?
Right. So the reason that I want to bet half pot on this turn is that I want to bet like wider than just a queen, and if I start to bet too big, then I just sort of narrow like the out of positions range to only queen X, and then I can never follow through on the river. So if I just have the nut flush draw here, it's nice to put some pressure on his 1-pair hands. Like he could just have ace jack, for example.
Right.
And I can put a lot of pressure on that hand with just a half pot bet. I don't need to go around, potting it. And if I do pot it, he folds that anyway. But now I just lose, $20 extra versus all his queens that are really sort of folding inelastically.
Okay, so the river comes, again, pairs the bottom card, the 8 pairs, you fill up, you bet half pot again.
Right, so after he checks to us, we bet half pot. And I think it's really important to not get too excited here and just, think, oh, sweet, I made a full house in a spot I'm not really supposed to have full houses.
I'll overbet it.
Yeah, exactly, because that would look pretty suspicious. You got to remember, okay, I mostly just have a bluff here, or a queen, or king-queen, right?
Yep.
So, we can certainly get value with a hand like king-queen. It's not like the villain's going to check-fold queen-10 on the river, for example. But we don't want to just go around bombing it, because obviously there's, 12x pot behind, and we don't want to get all in for 12x pot with just a straight. So we bet half pot, and villain check raises us pretty big, actually very big, because he perceives us to be capped, which is, generally the case. And we have a pretty trivial shove, only losing to, one combo of quads.
Right.
And obviously, in this exact hand, villain had second nut boat. But, there's spots where second nut boat's probably not good versus many people. And I think, I remember getting snap called here, and I think if I was in his shoes, I'd have done so significantly less enthusiastically.
Well, it seems like, so he's got pocket tens. He makes a set on the turn. It seems like, there's a bunch of your range that's 8-9 that fills up, Jack 8, that kind of, you also have full houses that he beats, I guess.
The question is, would those 3 bet all in
right
on the river? So maybe not.
And I think it's also important to realize that those hands don't all bet the turn, right? I mean, I'm advocating betting the turn here with top set, but with top set, if we boat up, we'll always have the nut boat, and if the river bricks and it goes check, because we're not planning on value betting the river here, obviously, on a deuce, we get value from all of his 2 pairs or worse sets that check called the turn, and then, we just show down against them. If we're betting a hand like 8-9 on the turn, not only do we not ever make nut boat, but if he check calls a set of tens, and then the river bricks, and it goes check, check. We just burn the turn bet.
Right.
So I think you only want to be betting sort of the very top of your set range.
On that turn.
Exactly, yeah.
Awesome. 2 interesting hands, Chris. Thanks so much. Really appreciate your time. Anybody else want to check out some more of Chris's stuff? Head on over to runitonce.com to watch some videos and sign up over there. Chris, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, that's a little bit of the No Limit Hold'em, which
good knowledge. Good knowledge. I thought it was some great concepts that
we learned a little bit there.
This week.
That's good. Now we got some PLO strat to talk. So why don't we go to the Ross report?
Good old Rosco. Sure glad he's all right.
Listen, boy, you gotta pick your spots good. You gotta make hay while the sun shines. Hey, good. You dipstick!
You no more horns?
Under the gun, you don't raise. You limp in there.
That's the Adam A. Schwartz report.
Yeah. Oh, I see. We've modified it.
Yes.
Because there's no Ross PLO hands. He's too busy betting on the Chicagos to have some poker hands. So I actually went and played some. I was the only one who played poker this week, I think.
Probably true.
I'm the only one. So I went down to our local casino here, the Edgewater, that has a 1-2-5 PLO game. We've talked about it before. It is a min $200 buy, max unlimited. Good game, and there's 3 games going when I went.
3, wow.
Yeah, it was.
Last time I played, they would never have more than 2.
A lot of action, a lot of fun. So I sat down. I got a couple of hands I wanted to ask you guys about. So here goes. Early, I buy. How much did I buy? I bought 1,000.
Okay.
So I sat down.
It's pretty standard for that game.
Yeah, I'm in the small blind. Well, first of all, let give you a little what's going on in the first. There was 2 in the first half hour. I was there. Not lying at all. There was, because it's a 1-2 game, but the opening is if you want to raise, you generally raise to 15. If you want to limp, you can limp for 5. You can't limp for 2, so it's a limp for 5.
Mm-hmm.
There was 2 hands that were 10-way limped before the pot.
Cue the drop.
I gotta get my mouse out.
Yeah, you got to be ready on that. What is
Under the gun, you don't raise. You limp in there.
There you go. So
Indeed. I actually somebody on Twitter gave me that one too.
I think they've been listening to old BigPoker.ca
2005 strategy advice from Schwartz.
Yeah.
So just to give you an idea of how this game was going, it was raise under the gun, $7 kind of thing. So you had to produce hands for sure. So here goes hand number 1. I'm in the small blind. I pick up the King, Queen, Jack, and I've got King High Spades. I'm in the small blind. There's a raise under the gun to 15. I think there's 3 calls. The button makes it 85. I call. Do you like?
Yeah, I think
like
so. I mean, I think obviously if the button hadn't 3-bet, I think I would be the one 3-betting. It's such a premium hand, obviously.
Even out of position, yeah.
Yeah, but I don't want to be playing for stacks because you're just going to have adverse selection and end up against aces.
Aces when you get it in. Okay, button 85. So I call in the small blind, and 3 of us go to the flop. So there's 250, 260, a little bit more in there. The flop is 7-6 deuce with 2 clubs. Again, I have the King, Queen, Jack, spades, but I think I have clubs in the hand. This is in my head. I had clubs, right?
Okay.
So check to the raise of the 3-better pre. He bets 185, and I call, and everybody else folds.
So you call with an overpair, but a mental draw to the second nut flush.
The second, he's got the future second nut flush blocker.
In some alternate universe, I have. Yeah, he's got the second nut right.
The future blocker.
It was So, but let's say I don't think I have clubs there. I don't even think it's that bad of a call otherwise, because I think he's going to bet a lot of flops there to try and pick it up. It's a pretty dry. Yeah, I don't hate the call with kings, just to see what he's going to do on the turn. This guy. Yeah, I mean,
you got all those people in between you. You got 5 guys in between you who could just have.
But they're gonna fold out most of their hands that don't hit this range.
But I guess you have some amount of showdown equity, but you have no draw in anything whatsoever.
I don't. I do not,
as Ross points out.
In my mind, I do.
In your mind, you do. In your mind, it's a perfectly good call. If you had what you thought you had,
it was okay.
Perfectly fine.
So here comes the turn. It is the Jack, an offsuit Jack. So it's now 7-6 deuce. The Jack of Hearts rolls off. 2 clubs still. Check. He bets 425 all in. And now I look and I see, because I'm going to check, make sure I see I have spades.
So the play, I guess, is to call your optometrist.
talk to MJ.
My prescription might be a little off.
Right.
And then advocate for a 4-color deck.
Right. That's what's. But in the moment, I look. I'm getting a pretty good price that he is, because I don't think he bets aces here all in. I think. What
do you think he does?
I think he's polarized to a lot of bluffs. I think there's a lot of bluffs in his range or draws. And
I think he does. I mean, I think it's true. Sort of a lot of the time, he'll have like an incomplete draw or something like that. Like he might have like some sort of middling wrap that has some chunk of that. He might have like top pair and some
pair and a straight draw, something like that.
But I think that's. I think he has aces often enough to make it so that even like, because those hands still have equity against you. But so I think he has aces often enough that I think it's still I think it's still a losing call.
Aces
think so?
in the nut flush draw.
Oh yeah, like I mean,
ace 7.
Oh sure, he's got me beat in a bunch of hands in his ranges, but I think part of his also part of his range is hands that I'm ahead of.
Yeah, so I mean, how much do we have in the pot here? We've got like
there's 600 something in the pot. There's more than maybe almost 700.
Yeah,
and he's betting 425.
So you have to win
jack
like,
or maybe a deuce.
You have to win like 30% of the time. Yeah, I mean, it's probably not terrible, but I think it's probably still losing play.
I call.
Okay. What did he have?
Deuce in the river, offsuit deuce. So it's now 7-6 deuce, jack deuce, flush didn't make it. He rolls over the queen jack of clubs, doesn't show the other two cards.
Oh yeah.
And I show him the kings, and I take
aggressive.
I mean, that's the thing. Like the queen jack of clubs, obviously, it just has a ton of equity against you.
And you look like either a genius or a fish.
Yep.
People can't really figure it out.
It's not bad. It's not a bad way to start. Start off.
It's
fantastic. Now I'm gonna get action.
Just throw over two kings with no side cards.
Yeah. Oh wow! Look at this guy. All right.
Actually, it would be funny if you thrown over king jack and let them think that you think you have top pair of jacks.
He showed the queen jack.
That's the truly advanced play. Is to show king jack. I think, and then
that would have been awesome.
And announce proudly, I have jacks and twos.
I just beat you.
Or just jacks.
King kicker, buddy.
Just say jacks.
Kicker plays.
Yeah. That's the truly advanced play.
All right. Next hand, I am on the button with 2,300 stack. Raise under the gun to 15. Several callers to the cutoff, who makes it 90. And this guy, actually, the guy who raised, played a really interesting pot. He's got a bunch. He's got me covered, and another guy at the table has me covered over 2,000 or 3,000. And this guy that raised here, I want to tell you about this hand he played. He raised in a pot under the gun. He got a flat behind him. It came king, deuce, 3, 2 diamonds. This guy, the original raiser, had ace 5 of diamonds. King of diamonds. So four rolls off in the turn, so he makes a wheel with nut flush draw, straight flush draw. Bets, guy behind him raises, and he thinks and mucks the ace 5 of diamonds straight up.
Wow.
I was like, wow. Not too many people make that fold. He was right, too. The other guy showed him the
5-6.
This is the 5-6. Yeah. But anyway, so this is the guy that makes it 8. What did I say he made? Hang on. He makes it 90.
Okay.
There's again, he 3-bet to 90. I call with ace, queen, jack, 9 with a suited ace. I think it's a pretty standard call there.
Yeah.
4 of us to the flop. The flop is ace 6-5 rainbow. Again, I have ace, queen, jack, 9. It checks all the way to me. I check. I don't see any value in betting there. The turn is a deuce. It's now 8-6-5 deuce, full rainbow. Checks around to me.
I think I'm betting.
You think you're betting?
Yeah, I mean, I don't even hate betting on the flop, really. To be honest, like you're betting in position. Like, yeah, okay. Sure,
I mean, my range is capped.
You don't have aces, but I mean, is people gonna really go like, okay, I'm just gonna blast this guy because he didn't have aces? I don't think it happens at all. I think a lot of time you just pick up the pot. I think you might get like if a guy's sitting there hanging out with like 6-5 or something like that, you'll be able to blow him off the pot later. I think there's value in betting the flop. I definitely think there's value in betting the turn, given that 3-4 isn't terribly likely.
Checks around to me, I check again. So it's, again, ace 6-5 deuce. The river's a 9. I make top 2. It checks around to me, and I bet 150, a little less than half the pot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, clearly you have to bet now with the top 2 pair.
It folds back to the original raiser, who makes it 425. Yeah.
That's sort of an eye raiser there because what the hell is
what the hell does he have?
I mean, I don't really know.
Does he have 7-8 and he just expected me to bet last person to bet on
or it's like you said before, now he thinks your range is capped because obviously you didn't have 3-4, you didn't bet the turn, you shouldn't have 3-4 that often anyway, you don't have two aces, like what do
you do in this spot?
I mean, my curiosity almost just gets me to call, even though I think I'm beat most of the time, just because people don't take weird lines like this to bluff. I think.
Ross, what do you think?
Well, since you haven't played in that game much, obviously he doesn't have some sort of sick read on you, as maybe he had one in the previous hand where he folded the nut flush.
Right.
Where it might have been just he's played a ton with that player and he knows he's super nitty.
He didn't fold the nut flush. He folded the nut straight, second nut straight with the nut flush draw.
Oh, okay. Right.
Anyways, but
either way, but yeah, it's so.
I mean, it's a question of what does it mean when somebody takes such an incredibly weird line in a very small pot.
I feel like usually in that game, they're more creatively trying to get value this way than I think they are trying to make a super wild bluff. That's not really what happens.
So I thought, like Terrence said, I thought I looked like a nit. I've checked twice behind it. I'm probably not going to check 7-8, so he knows I probably don't have the nut straight.
Yeah, the only thing that I would, get me cautious is if maybe on the turn, if it looked like you thought you were thinking about betting.
Right.
So then if he picks up on that read, he knows that you're semi-strong and might be able to value raise the river. That's sort of the only thing that if you sort of hesitated and sort of made it look like, if you subtly reach for chips in a sort of way.
I pretty much snapped.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway, so he made it again. I bet 150. He made it 425, and I just thought he was trying to blast me off the hand. I call, and he mucks his hand face down.
Oh.
So I pick up that pot.
Good for you, Bluff Catching Schwartz over here.
Yeah, it's the station. Just call me the station. Last hand, interesting hand.
Creative hand.
And I don't know how I play. I don't know how to play this, and I don't know what to do with it. I raised under the gun with Ace Jack 10-8 suited ace. I get 4 calls. So not a huge pot, 15, right? 60, 70 in the middle.
Online players are looking at you going like, what? You raised and got 4 callers. What are you talking about?
I know. That's like...
that doesn't happen.
I was surprised everybody folded. It was more than anything. But anyway, so the flop comes ace, ace, 6. Again, I have ace, jack, 10-8. I bet, I think, a little 2/3 of the pot. And a solid player, he calls. The turn is a 5. No flushes, nothing like that. I check. First of all, do you like checking the turn there?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I check. He bets, and I call. I don't think I can fold here.
No,
ton of outs
you have so many
outs. I might be good. The river. And by the way, he bet 3/4 pot. He made a decent side bet. The turn. The river is a 7, so it's ace, ace, 6, 5, 7. No flush. I check, and he bets almost full pot.
I think I fold pretty quickly here. I mean, this is not a line.
What's his hand? It's sixes or ace, like ace king. I don't think he value bets ace king in the river.
I mean, he could just have an accidental full house. Like he has ace 6, he has ace 7. I mean, it
seems possible. I mean,
he has ace 5. Like I don't see why he can't just have any of those. I honestly can't see why he can't have any of those full houses.
Yeah, but there's not many combos of that. I have an ace, so there's not a ton of combos of that.
Yeah,
there's a lot of cards out there.
Well, there's one ace, right?
There's only one ace, but I mean, how many?
You can have it. I'm not saying that.
He called you on the flop with something.
Yeah.
So what did he call you on the flop with? That you can be like once there's like a bet on the flop and a bet on the turn. I mean, I think you said it on the turn. It's like you have a ton of nut outs and you might be good. I think that might.
Yep.
I don't know what that might is, whether it's like 20%, 30%, 40%.
What's the might? Yeah.
But it goes down a lot when he pots the river.
Okay, so I fold. And I'm trying to think about how I can play this hand differently.
I think you could fold that with a pretty clear conscience.
I think maybe the flop is the place to check instead of leading in that flop.
Unless it was the same guy as the last hand.
It was a different guy.
No, I like c-betting here just because, I mean, you do have big aces in your range a lot.
Yeah, you're like, I think with 3 overs... You're like 45%
exactly.
versus an already made full house.
Exactly. That's another good point. Yeah.
All right. Pretty decent day. Had a nice little win. So I will be going back and hopefully have some more hands to run with.
Bring the good player glasses this time.
That's right.
Although it made you money.
It did. Why don't we dip into the mailbag here and get through what we can? We have time to.
And now.
That right there is the mail. Now let's talk about the mail. Can we talk about the mail, please, Mac? I'm dying to talk about the mail with you all day, okay?
Mailbag.
Guess who called again?
Is this the Ian segment?
This is the Ian segment.
Awesome.
Email number
1. Hey guys, what's up? It's Ian, the Underground New York dealer. Just calling in. Had a question about a way. I have a question for you guys about how I should go about doing something for tips. By the way, when I called last week about the pot limit Omaha pre-flop pot raise, I made a mistake. It was 2-5, not 5-5. That was what we had the blow up about whether the small blind's supposed to be counted as a completed bet or not. But anyways, so my question for you guys is, last night I built a big tournament. I do it. It's one of my regular games I go to. It's a $40 rebuy tournament. It's crazy structure. There's tons of add-ons and rebuys and re-entries. And there's about 50, 60 players in this game. So the prize pool gets up there. So my question was, the final table, we're at the final table, I'm dealing the final table, and, there's like 6 guys left, and one gets knocked out, now it's 5 guys, and they decide to chop the pot, the prize pool, 5 ways. So there was, they each got about 600 after chopping, so the prize pool was pretty good. But my question was, there was a guy who won, who chopped, one of the choppers, and he tipped $10. I know that standard in a tournament, at least in underground games, I don't know about real casino games. I've never actually played in a real casino tournament. But the standard is 10%. Everybody knows that. And he was a new player. He didn't really understand that, you're supposed to tip. At least I don't think he did. Anyways, long story short, he only tipped $10. And, I'm happy to get whatever it is that I get. It's a tip. It's a service-based thing. I get it. But, I wanted to know what you guys thought about what's a good way to tell new players that, oh, hey, the standard is 10%. Or, because as a dealer, I'm never going to say that to a player. That's just bad business. But, I just thought it was interesting because, you win $600 and you tip only 10. I mean, I would think common sense would tell you to tip a little more than that. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Been enjoying these past couple episodes. Loved Phil Galfon's interview. Best of luck to everything, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.
We need a new Ian drop, I think, for the mailbag. No, these are great. Thanks, Ian. Appreciate the call. So I almost want to cue up the Pulp Fiction Steve Buscemi tipping line from remember that one? Or no, it's Reservoir Dogs when they're talking about tip. Anyway, 10% is standard of tipping of your win. That seems really high.
Well, okay. So Ian prefaced this by saying he never played in a real casino. So I think at least for most of Adam and my poker careers, I think the sort of standard was around 3% for poker tournaments, and then
because they withhold 3%. First of all, right?
Now they do.
Right. Sorry.
Yeah. So I was getting to that. So,
okay. All right.
Okay. So for like most of when I started playing poker in like 1998 in the late 90s, it tended to be towards 3% for a lot of tournaments like the World Series. And then what sort of happened was there was a ton of variance, right? So like the guy who won the main event, if he was a cheapskate, then the dealers got nothing, and if the guy was really generous, then there was a big bounty. And they didn't like that consistency with good reason. So the tournament directors, sort of kind of all over the world, sort of decided to start standardizing this and say, okay, we're just going to take 3% out of the prize pool, and then it's not on the generosity of the individual. Then you don't have these awkward situations where the guy goes to the payout line and says like, so sir, like, congratulations on your win, how much would you like to contribute, and all these sort of awkward situations. And that was generally seen as a great thing. Now, of course, we're into the situation where the dealers the tournaments are taking a percentage for the staff, and then a percentage for the house rake, and then this and that and the other thing, and now they still ask you how much to take.
Right.
So I mean, if 10% is the standard in this underground game, then that's fine. I mean, we don't play in these games. We don't know what's standard for the underground games. I mean, my sort of thought on how to educate the player is to not, because, in my view, it's unlikely that the guy simply doesn't know, because I know whenever I'm in a situation where I don't know where the standard etiquette is,
I go ask.
You just ask somebody, like, what's like a standard tip here? Like, and there's certainly been a lot of situations, like, how much do you tip your paragliding instructor? It's like, well, I don't go paragliding every weekend, so I probably should ask something.
Yeah.
Or like, you're in a foreign country, right? That happens a lot. Like,
nobody tips here. What are you doing?
Yeah, well, nobody tips here. Or you're riding in a cab in Albania for the first time. Like, you don't know how much you're supposed to tip the guy, like, or whether you are supposed to at all. But you go online, you ask some people what's normal. So the sort of my thought is that if the guy wanted to know the real answer, he would have asked somebody.
Yeah, and a guy that I think it's kind of up to players. Like, if I'm a player and I chop it 6 ways and we win 600, I'm probably going to look at the table and go, okay, everybody, we're all going to leave like $30.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable to have that discussion in the chop. Yeah,
but the players have to have the discussion.
I agree.
Not the dealer, because there's just no way.
And this
you
happens
can do
a lot. If you go to the World Series, if you go to like the satellite room, and deals are like almost like fewer than 10% of satellites play to the actual conclusion, because it's always by that time you're playing for like $2,500 for first and like a set of steak knives for second, kind of thing. And so they try to fly.
Fired.
Yeah, third is you're fired. Thank you. And so you have
third prize is you're fired.
You have these negotiations go on and say like, okay, well, I'm the chip leader. I've got 50, I've got 60-40 on you, Adam, and you really getting on my case about chopping it evenly. I might cave in and say, okay, we'll chop it evenly, but you have to take care of the deal.
Yeah,
Something like that, and these sort of things are often part of the deal-making process.
I think that's just going to happen sometimes where you get people that don't know, and it's going to be balanced out by other times when you're going to have generous people. Right, you're going to have a lady who's just doesn't need the money. She's just going to give you a bunch of money.
It's just variance.
Yeah.
I mean, and in fairness, poker dealers aren't the ones who are supposed to be subject to a lot of variance, right? Like, if as a poker player, like, you sit down, you go to your local card room, you sit down, and there's 8 Wall Street guys who want to blast off money. Hopefully, none of them are Strasser.
Yeah.
And then you make a bunch of money and you go home. Other days you go and you're going to play with a bunch of champions, and you're going to go home with your tail between your legs, and that's variance. And in fairness, poker dealers aren't supposed to deal with it. They're supposed to just get their wage, they get their tips, they want their steady income. But you have to accept that in a service industry that's going to happen. I mean, waiters have bad nights too, and cab drivers and everybody else who works for tips.
Right. When I first started playing, and I spent a bunch of time in LA, I went to Hollywood Park. I spent a lot of time playing there. I started seeing.
You lived there. Let's be honest.
I did, kind of. I started seeing one of the dealers, and I stayed at her place, and but the dealers at Hollywood Park would make a lot of money in tips, because the way they structured the games, there are always $2 and $3 chips, and they get 1 or 2 a hand. They would make $500-$600 a night in tips, right?
Wow.
So she'd come home and back to the place, and she'd say, oh, I had a great night. I made $500. It was awesome. And then she'd come home, and then other nights would be like 180,
right?
And she'd be bitching and complaining,
right.
Like, oh, I only made 100. I'm like, what?
Well, what's your average?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's the big thing. Like, you made 500 yesterday, and you made 180 today. So let's just pretend that you made 340 for both of those days.
So that's kind of the way you got to look at it.
Email number 2.
Armando in New York City writes, T, you know what? You're going to have to read this one, buddy.
Why do? Oh, I
this
see.
This is for smart people to read, and not for...
Armando in New York City wants to tell us how far from Kelsey is.
Right.
And so he told us that he is 3.39 times 10 to the e to the negative 5th astronomical units from Kels. Do you know what an astronomical...
Big school words. Just use normal people words and I'll understand what you're talking about.
All right, stripper trivia. Ross, do you know what an astronomical unit is?
We talked about this previously on the show. It's like the distance between
to the sun or the moon or something.
Moon?
Distance to the moon.
Adam, what is your final answer?
Would you say moon?
Yeah,
I feel like that's right. No, wait a second. No, I don't know. Sure, I'll go moon.
Earth to the sun.
Earth to the sun.
Oh.
93 million miles. It's the average distance.
So he's 93 million miles from Kels?
No, he's 10 to the negative fifth, right? So, when you have an so you know what 10 to the fifth is, right?
Of course. Yes.
So you just take 10 and you put 5 zeros behind it. So this
way you take away 5 zeros.
You take away the zeros, you move the decimal point to the left. Okay. Multiply that by 3.39, and that is how far New York City is from Kells.
That's fantastic. All right, thanks, Armando.
Is that in the Kells.club calculator?
No, we should get that in the Kells.club calculator.
All right, carry on. Now that with that little science lesson.
I get the dumb part? Okay, question number 1. Didn't Kassouf technically violate a rule? Rules say even in a hand, players cannot disclose comments of live or folded hands to advise or criticize play at any time. And the exceptions don't seem to apply. In quotes, a participant is allowed to mention the strength or content of his or her hand if no other participant in the hand will have a decision to make. Stacey Madison is another participant in the hand that will have a decision to make. Anyway, I personally like seeing Kassouf on TV, enjoyed the interview, and think he should be allowed to say anything head up, in quotes, unless the player asks for quiet, which Kassouf has acknowledged. So he's got another question, but let's answer this one first. The way it's written, again, I think we mentioned it before, is that the rules are so ambiguous that you can basically make
sort of who's the participant. Is Stacey Madison the other participant, or if you're talking about, if you and the other guy are heads up in the pot, then you're allowed to make it. And I think actually Armando's correct in sort of saying that Stacey Madison is the other opponent. I think the exception is supposed to be like, let's say, Adam, you've bet all in, and now I'm on me. I'm allowed to say
talking stuff through.
Yeah, I'm allowed to say, oh Jesus, like I have queens here, like I don't know what I'm supposed to do with queens or whatever. Like
right, but as we said before, if you're going to stop Kassouf and apply this rule to him, there's a whole shit ton of people that you need to stop talking.
And of course he never actually says, like, I have X, right? What he says is, I have a good hand, and I have blah, 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 and I think you should fold, and this and that, and he says 18 million other things, which you've heard about, but yeah.
So does he violate that rule? Yes, but so does a lot of people. Yeah. Question 2, how come no one ever pronounced Isildur like Isildur, like in Lord of the Rings? It's spelled the same way, but I've never heard it pronounced that way ever, and it has always tilted me. My thought is because Dur was already around that people just added the Isel in front of the Dur.
I think that's probably correct.
I think that's actually
I don't think there's there's enough Lord of the Ring fans to balance out the people who were Dur fans before
in poker
came along. So sorry you lose on that one, Armando.
Email number
004.
Ryan says, your story about Mimi Tran choosing not to take advantage of having seen your cards inspired me to share a story about the nicest thing anyone has done, he puts that in quotes, at the poker table. This is a hand that occurred 5,063 miles from Kells. A few years ago, I was playing in a 2-5 no-limit game while waiting for a seat in another game. The exact board in this hand doesn't matter, but by the river, the board is paired, and we are heads up, not head up, Adam. A lot of people needling you this week on the head up thing. I went all in on the river, and the following happens. The other player tables his hand face up without saying anything, but he does so in a way that suggests he's trying to fold and show his hand. After doing so, and looking at his hand and the board, he realizes he has a straight flush rather than just a flush. Nobody has said anything. He then pushes a stack of chips forward and declares, call. I'd estimate that about 5 seconds elapsed between when he tabled his hand and when he pushed the chips forward. Long enough that there was a palpable moment of ambiguity, but not so long that the dealer reached for his cards to muck them. After the player pushed his chips forward, the players and the dealer looked at me as if to ask, are you going to object to this? I did not. I told the dealer to give him the pot. As a general rule, I don't call the floor unless I think someone is angle shooting. Soon after, I am called from my game and I leave the table. Playing the main game, having long forgotten about this hand, this guy comes over, drops a pile of chips in front of me on the table, and tells me that he had intended and fold and didn't feel right taking the money. I protested, he insisted, and so I said thanks and took the money. It wasn't the entire pot, but he did give me my half back. Anyway, after all the stories circulating about bad acts in poker, I thought I should send along a heartwarming one. I'd also be interested in your take on what the floor would have ruled if I'd called, or should have ruled if I'd called. I think his hand's still live until the dealer mucks or he declares fold, and the dealer should seek clarity before mucking. Keep up the good work. All right, Ryan. Adam, your thoughts on Ryan's? I guess it is a nice story, guys.
Yeah.
You don't hear very often about a guy coming over 2 hours later thinking about the actions and saying like, "Here's your half of the pot back."
I think if the floorman got called over, he's going to look for intent, right? That's what floormen look for. What was the intent of this player when he rolled his hand over? If there was clearly, if the guy would have known he had a straight flush, he's not going to table his hand and think for 5 seconds and then call, right? So I think it could have been deduced by the floorman asking some questions that this was a mistake he was trying to fold and show. And I think you're going to get about a coin flip of response. Some floormen are going to ward him the pot, and some are going to kill his hand, I think.
Well, it's funny because I completely disagree with you. So I mean, it's an interesting coin flip. You might be our sample size of 2 validates that. I think it's a clear call. Yeah, I don't think you look for intent here. I think the rule superseding that is that simply a shown hand is a live hand. I think it's reasonable to say this happened in a tournament. I think for sure he's getting a penalty. Like, there's no question he might be getting. He's at least getting a hand, and he's maybe even getting around. And in a cash game, I don't know that there's any penalty to even give him. I think he turns the hand over, and until the dealer mucks it, that's still his hand, and the action is still on him. So I mean, I think he wins the pot if the 4 gets called.
Email number.
It's number 5.
Troy writes, "Hey guys, love the show. Wanted to tell you about a fun action game that's been put in the rotation in a private game. It's called the Lincoln. It's the same as Omaha, except it's reversed. You must play 3 out of the 4 in your hand and exactly 2 on the board. Obviously, winning straights and flushes are nearly non-existent. Getting trips in the hole is huge, and the board doesn't have to pair to a full house. So King 10 9 5 3 board, King 10 5 would be top full, but you have to be aware of somebody holding trip 5s, trip 3s, or trip 9s in the hole. I thought it was lame at first, but then you see how much bluffing to the nuts there is, and it's good for the game. As a beginner, it got me to thinking about how well or poorly I played the game and how I ranked versus the competition. I was curious about your best games. I'm assuming that for Terrence it's Limit Hold'em, for Adam it's Omaha 8 or better, and for Ross it's PLO. You play those the best, but are they the games in which you believe you have the biggest edge over the field? For example, probably everyone plays No Limit Hold'em closest to GTO as there's more experience and training material, but we probably don't have as big an edge. Was wondering if you could name your best 2 or 3 games, both closest to GTO and biggest edge. Ross, do you want to take it away? What do you think is your best game, and where do you think you have the biggest edge?
It would have to be PLO or No Limit Hold'em versus terrible players.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that Troy underestimates how many poor players there are. There's a sort of common narrative that like everybody playing No Limit is good. And if you're playing above 3-6 No Limit on PokerStars, that's like kind of maybe true.
Even down to probably 50 cents a dollar.
Sure, it's definitely tough. But I mean, if you walk into a typical casino and you can find good games. I mean, if you look at World Series events, if you look at EPT events, you're gonna see some spots for sure. So
what's your best game?
I mean, it probably is Limit Hold'em, and it's probably the game that I have the smallest edge at. It's not an easy game to find edges at, for sure. I mean, I definitely think that I would have a bigger edge in a typical No Limit Hold'em, say, tournament, or a cash game than a Limit Hold'em tournament or cash game. But I mean, it might even, the biggest edge might even be something like Triple Draw, which I think I'm pretty decent, but not elite at. But other people are like horrendously
so bad. Yeah.
If you play the 1500 Triple Draw at the World Series, it will just blow your mind how people will it'll go like 3. It'll go like 3-3-1 on the first draw, and then like the 1 will check behind or something like that. There's just like insane amounts of like money being spewed away in triple draw games.
Omaha 8 used to by far be the game I was best at, but I haven't really played a lot in the last couple of years, just because there's no access to any games online or live. So I've probably lost a bunch of my edge in that game, I just from not having played it. I play a ton of PLO now, and I think that's probably the game that I have the biggest edge in, I would think. But yeah, I just based on where where you're going to play.
Email number
6.
The Duke writes, longtime listener, I enjoy the show. Thanks for doing it. I'm wondering if I missed the discussion about Doug Polk's run in the World Championship of Online Poker when y'all were doing your W Coop review. Admittedly, between headphones, Bluetooth, and home Bluetooth. Sometimes the show will start and I'll miss parts. Tell me if this is the case and I'll go back and find it. I thought there was a lot of really interesting aspects to it and was looking forward to the gang's take on it. It was the largest Twitch score ever. I think he won 400 and something thousand. 27,000 people were watching. The discussion of the deal and Doug being Doug in the deal by saying, I'm better than all of you guys. You better give me a price. The fact that he rebought and he was continuing apologizing to the people in the chat that bought a piece, explaining that they no longer had a piece, right? Because the viewers, that's interesting because the viewer, well, here, we'll finish off the email. So many topics in the Pokercast wheelhouse. I'm on the east coast of the U.S. I'm 215 feet from Kel's, altitudely speaking, which is good.
I see what he did there.
Yeah, so Doug's, if he sells off pieces to people who are watching, they're not sophisticated people with a lot of experience in poker backing. He busts out, he rebuys, and they all think they still have it. Oh, he's still playing. I got a piece, and he's got to go ahead and explain. No, you don't.
Yeah, it was one of those things too. When I you guys both bought a piece of me in the W Coop main, and then I busted pretty early.
And you're like, where are you guys? Where are you guys?
First bullet, and then I was like rebuying, but I was like, well, I'm gonna feel really bad. Like if this is the bullet that doesn't, I should offer to them. And then you guys weren't at your computer and didn't answer it, and I'm like, oh shit! Like how long is this offer supposed to be good for?
Do
like
I assume they're gonna buy in?
Exactly.
Again?
It's like, oh man, I hate this shit. Like this is why people do packages in advance and like explain all the terms and conditions on their 2+2 thread.
Doug's Twitch stream is awesome. I'm a subscriber to it. I watch it a lot. He's very good on it. 27,000 people watching is fantastic. I mean, obviously, he would have been on the front page. Sure. Great. We talk about things great for poker. That is 27,000. Yeah. There's no way there's 27,000 people that have a clue what's going on, but they're watching and getting exposed to it. And it's fun when you're getting exposed to it by a guy like Doug because he's interesting. He's entertaining, right? Yep. So I think it was fantastic for poker. When we talk about things that are good for poker, that was clearly one of them, I think.
What was also, I think, good for poker recently was Dan Bilzerian on Joe Rogan's podcast.
I got through like 25 minutes of that.
Yeah, it's
I haven't heard it.
There was one part where he's like, Joe Rogan straight up is like, how do you make all your money? And he's just like, pause. Poker. And I was like, in my mind, I was just like, bullshit.
Because he's talking about, because 5 minutes earlier, he's talking about how, like, oh, I beat this guy out of 10 million, and so I, beat this guy out of 14 million.
Yeah.
And so, to a guy like Joe Rogan, who really doesn't know a single thing about poker, he's sitting there, his mind is blown, right? It's just, and so it's so disingenuous for him to say this. I mean, he certainly made a bunch of money at poker. There's no denying that.
He made $50 million in a year playing poker.
Sure, but you need to have a bankroll to win $50 million.
Were close to it.
Exactly.
That know that he made. Yeah, of course you need a bankroll and everything, but I mean, when you make $50 million and now you're set for life, you don't have to do anything, and then Joe Rogan asks you years later, how do you make your money? And, well, I made it by playing poker. I mean,
fair enough.
It seems genuine to me.
Yeah.
If it's the case, how else would he make money, right? I mean, I guess sponsored, social media stuff, he's going to make some money.
Well, but I mean, presumably he inherited
a lot of money.
he inherited a bunch of money to. Yeah. But fair enough.
But he said some worthwhile things, I think, about poker that were good for the wider audience.
Yeah.
A lot of 14-year-old boys want to be Dan Bilzerian when they grow up. So I mean, it's not bad.
Email number 7.
Francis writes, hey guys, love the podcast and all that you contribute to my life in the poker world. However, you are really starting to grind me with the defense of William Kassouf's behavior at the WSOP. You don't have to keep writing in. There are fair parameters for Kassouf and his speech play, but he deliberately crosses the line and has done so for years. There are YouTube clips of him from the last 3 years behaving in an identical manner at London and Barcelona UPTs. He's a poker troll. The guy's solely about needling people. He acts meekly off the table when he's interviewed because this disguises his stunts back on the table. However, he reveals his colors when openly discussing with Disrael on the mic how he is tilting everyone and how he doesn't care about the officials. He gets off on it. Even so, I have little issue with him bullshitting whilst he makes his own decision. That said, his tanking and stalling are also excessive. It is after he's bet when he incessantly berates another player, making a decision when he's out of order, both in terms of basic etiquette and tournament guidelines. However, most irritating from the 2+2 perspective is you keep purporting that this is good for the game, that viewers would find this entertaining. No, they don't. The majority of poker fans who expressed an opinion across various fora patently disagree with you and find him intensely off-putting. I'm British myself and recognized Kassouf for precisely what he was from the first time I watched him. He's a wind-up merchant and deliberately provocative. Are we done defending William Kassouf?
Well, I mean, no. I from what happened last week, we talked about it already in the second segment. As far as the ganging up on him, yes, he's slow, but he's not. From what I have seen, and again, we only see an edited version. But it's not mean-spirited. The stalling I hate.
Right.
I don't.
Well,
I think that's.
Yeah. I think what Francis is saying is that if you watch like the EPTs and you sort of watch, because obviously we are getting an edited version, but if you watch the EPTs, you get obviously a fuller picture. And he's saying he's going over the rails, saying like, yeah, I'm really getting under these guys' skin. It's great, and he's intentionally doing this stuff. I mean, I guess the question is, what does good for poker mean? Like, can you be an asshole and also be good for poker? Because I don't think those things are necessarily mutually exclusive. Phil Ivey has been an asshole for so many years, and I don't think anybody would deny that he is good for poker. Like, he's grown the game. I mean, he's even been involved in the Ultimate Bet scandal and lent his name to that.
Right.
People still consider Phil Hellmuth on net
for poker.
Good for the game.
Right.
I mean,
Kassouf's clearly not Hellmuth. We get that.
Right.
But there's a lot of stuff about him that I dislike.
And I certainly
intensely.
wouldn't want to be at his table.
No.
And it's not to say that I wouldn't take his head off, like if he got under my skin. Like I might. Like I mean, but that's not really what's at play here. It's not whether we think he's a good guy. It's not whether we think we would enjoy him or whether we would want 8 of him at the table. It's just sort of. It's sort of like there's no such thing as bad press sort of thing. It's sort of it's one of these
Idiot from Northern Europe.
There we go.
All right, I think that's going to wrap it up for this week. Hopefully we're done. Well, we're not done with Kassouf because a big blow-up happens this week on the show, so we're going to talk more about it next week, I'm sure.
This is the most talked about, like, 24th place or whatever the hell he
19th
finished.
or whatever he was,
Place finisher in the history of poker.
He's like
right?
third in chips with 22 left.
So
and finishes 18th or 19th.
Yeah, it's looking like he's going to make the final table at this point, and can you imagine how long we've been talking about it if he had ended up making the
only one more
9.
week, folks. We have to put up with it.
Yeah. And then the real thing. And then we got the
next a week from today. Thanks so much to Jason Strasser for coming on and talking about the big one for One Drop. That was a lot of fun. Thank you to Chris Kruk from runatonce.com for coming by and giving us a little bit of strategy for the week. And thanks to you guys for getting together, doing another shoe here, a couple more weeks here, and then
Is this enough?
You're off to Hong Kong?
Yeah, I might try to get there in time for the Macau APPT event that always happens around that time of year. So, put the farm hunt on hold and head on over to a little warmer pastures.
Warmer climes.
Get a little training in MMA in.
Better food. Are you maybe fight over there?
I am hoping to fight. There's a card in Hong Kong on December 2nd, and I've been telling my friends
you're going to make me come to Hong Kong, are you?
Hey, I didn't make you do anything. You're the guy. You're the guy who on what 3 hours notice once flew to Hong Kong after the BC Poker Championships.
That's right.
So I mean, I don't make you do anything.
All right, and thanks to you for listening each week. Really appreciate it. Come on over, chat with us over at the forum, and drop us an email at pokercast@2plus2.com. Thanks a lot. We'll talk to you soon.